Why, hello there. You have joined me at episode 92 of a podcast that goes by the identity of Lookout Sir Warhammer 40,000. A Warhammer 40,000 podcast, as is evident by, the Warhammer 40,000 title within the title. Made, produced, developed, and delivered, I haven't done that for a while, by an assortment of friends, but most noticeably myself, Dan, who goes through the process of doing the introduction bit, and then, by extension, introducing my good buddy Phil. How's it going, Philip?
Oh, hello. I'm good.
Oh,
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. I'm glad, mate. I'm glad. It's funny when you do little funny intros, because I can't help but then immediately get involved in it. If you had that same trait, my introduction process would become way more difficult than it needs to be. So in a lot of respects, what I'm saying is that I need to do much better at controlling my enthusiasm when you do a funny voice.
No, well, I like to throw it out there sometimes.
Exactly. You're not just, an old crusty stick in the mud all the time. You're, you've got a personality.
I am that sometimes. Yeah.
Yes, quite possibly.
Bit both.
But, yeah. You are mostly with, people you don't know, I suppose.
If you say so.
Do you ever wonder, Phil, that, your real life version of yourself and your general kind of anxieties with public speaking and, sort of preference for isolation and tea, do you feel like, when you meet people that listen to the show that you have to kind of play up outside of your typical archetype because you put out a much more kind of, jovial internal version of yourself? This prior to this podcast, this is a version of Phil that few knew.
No, I mean, very few people, with the exception of a couple of people at No Retreat that I've met, have gone, oh yeah, I listened to that podcast. Yeah, great. I mean, so I more often, in the past, getting to tournaments at Warhammer World, more people would recognize me from my Beyond the Tabletop YouTube channel because they'd recognize my army and be like, I've seen that Krieg somewhere, and I'll be like, yeah, I'll do this thing, and be like, oh yeah, cool. Have a nice chit chat with them. That's fine. I haven't had many people go, oh, you that person from the podcast.
Have you not?
I had a few. I think old Tommy Garfield from Rapid Fire Wargaming was one of them.
Oh, yes.
He was like, oh, I like your podcast.
That's nice, isn't it?
I was like, thanks very much.
Yeah. I mean, what else would you say under the circumstances? You're not the sort of person who should be listening to this podcast, Tom. Out!
Or or maybe he'd say something like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that face."
You're much uglier than I imagined you might be.
Well, yeah. I mean,
or maybe
I was inferring that. I didn't want to actually say it down.
Oh, you could have been inferring that you thought you were prettier than you thought you might be.
Oh, obviously, I am, Dan.
Obviously, goes without saying. Obviously, it's so beautiful. I'm so lucky to stare into those beautiful eyes every week when we do this over video. It's only a terrible shame that others don't get to enjoy the same privilege in that regard. But what they do get to enjoy is the contents of episode 92, which is, Phil?
So this week, we're going to be talking about, finally, it's been much requested, you get our opinions on Warhammer Plus. We're going to go back over the reveal that obviously was, over a week or so, 2 weeks ago now. We're going to talk about that. We've also tacked on a little bit about terrain because following on from last week's episode, Games Workshop have done a new Meta Watch article, hot out today as of time of recording, which was Tuesday. So we're going to kind of go back over some of the stuff we talked about last week, updating it. This is a little FAQ, an errata for our own podcast from last week, basically. It's not just the exclusive domain of Games Workshop that can do that sort of thing.
Exactly. There is where we be, admitting that we might have been wrong about some things, but also just having a nice, fun, general chit-chat on the topic of terrain and stuff. But before we do that, we have, of course, a 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello, Dad.
What are you doing in here, son?
Oh,
What have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh, man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter!
Well, What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of a award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Look Out Sir podcast, which right now, it's time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with that, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
All right, then, Phil. This 5-star review comes from where?
Apple Podcasts of Great Britain.
You would be wrong, Phil. Although we do well, Phil, in the Britons. Today, this 5-star review comes from none other than the United States of America, who seemingly have heard our cries for, more podcast reviews of the 5-star persuasion and have obliged. So much so, I have to be completely honest with you, Phil. This one is quite blunt and to the point, but I am not one to discriminate and to ignore a 5-star review merely because it lacks, length and subject matter that we can debate at greater length. But I will say this, maybe, in the future, if you're going to do a 5-star review, a little more. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but come on, you got to give me something to work with. Otherwise, I've got to do this weird filler thing, which I'm doing now. But should I just call out the review, Phil, and then we can
let's hear
debate
it.
the virtues?
Yeah, exactly. Let's hear it, and then we can critique it.
Exactly. Well, this week's 5-star review, Phil, comes from Alex from JC. Now, I don't know where JC is, but that is where Alex resides, seemingly, or at least where he heralded from in the original instance. Maybe that's Jam County. I don't know if Jam County exists in America. But
Jersey Shore instead of
Jersey City.
Jersey City. I don't.
Jersey City. Jersey. I don't know. It's like I don't know, one of the islands of Manhattan around New York or whatever. I don't know. I'm so confused. All the options. I'm apologizing profusely that I'm not super familiar with the various acronyms associated with locations within America, assuming that's obviously where JC is even located. So yeah, I can see Phil frantically typing, by the way, looking for the location.
Jersey City.
It is Jersey City, is it?
Yeah.
We assume.
Well,
Anyway,
there might
could
be others, but that's what Google tells me.
Well, there you go. Good old Google. And what does Google not know about the American populace, eh? Nothing. They have all your data. Mine too, to be fair. We're all in one big pot together being sold off to advertisers. What a treat. And who knows who else. So anyway, this 5-star review reads, y'all asked, I delivered. 5 stars, as is, of course, a prerequisite of a 5-star review. Here is a 5-star review. And that's it, Phil. That's literally all that was said by Alex from JC.
Oh, right. It felt like he was introducing it. Here's the 5-star review, and then it was gonna. Oh, well, I mean, in a way, it's a good troll comment. It's like here it is. I've done your requirements to the letter. It's not a 3-star review, unlike some people. It's a 5-star review, and that's it. It's just a 5-star review. Noting
though, Phil, when you're gonna kind of throw shade at the 3-star review, a 3-star review masquerading as a 5-star review, that was
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that person is still, is in error, and they're gonna get around to updating that 3-star to a 5-star at some point.
I do love the lengths we're going to try and correct that mistake. We really want to sort of see those percentage points increase in terms of our US reviews. Anyway, no, but all the same. Yeah, no, I mean, look, it is very much to the letter. And in a way, I actually quite appreciate the fact that it's quite trolly in that way, because I think, again, it's one of the things I love about our audience. I like the fact that they take a bit of a kick at us. I like the fact that they throw some shade our way and make our lives difficult, because that's a delight. I think that's one of the best things about this segment is it kind of communicates the personality of the show, but also our listeners, and it gives us a chance to kind of, gauge the temperature of, what the kind of people who listen to our show are like. And in this instance, I'm not disappointed. I think this is fantastic. And if you want to be like Alex from Jersey City, You need only go onto the interwebs and place a 5-star review somewhere where that can be done. It could be Facebook, it could be Instagram. It can't be Instagram, that's not possible. It could be iTunes, and it could be other places that you can leave 5-star reviews. But if it is in those such locations, please reach out to us and let us know they exist. Otherwise, we just won't know, because the way our kind of filtration device for reviews works, it just basically pulls through all of the iTunes stuff. And we know Facebook because we're quite active in that space. But yeah, if you're putting reviews elsewhere, we just don't know. But there you go. If you want to do a 5-star review, please do. And we'll get around to calling out at some point in the future, noting that at this point, not bragging, we do have quite a few to get through at this point, which is amazing. Maybe we're going to have to start doing 2 a week, Phil.
Or maybe. Yeah, I'm sure people would like that.
Maybe. Although that feels like it might dilute the impact of being featured, don't you think?
True. Unless we're
giving them a bum deal.
Yeah, unless we do some kind of, face off where 2 get to fight and then we pick 1 to actually read out.
No, but that was ridiculous. What we're going to be doing there? We're going to ask people when they submit their 5-star reviews to also include like a stat line.
Maybe like a Kotok. Yeah.
Yes, we're going to roll off for it every time. Please no, though, because the amount of production involved in making the Kotok work is totally not worth the actual output. Anyway, let's say thank you to Alex from JC. I feel like I kind of did that already, but just to reiterate, thank you so much for the 5-star review, mate. All jokes aside, it really means a lot to us to see the support of the community, and obviously really appreciate you taking the time to support the show and to, show your broad appreciation. Thank you. And to expand on that, here's Phil.
Alex from Jersey City, we hope. Thanks.
I see what you did there, Phil. You gave it back with both barrels there. Yeah, all right, fair enough. Cool, all right, well, let's get on with it then. Transitional noise. Woo! All right there, Phil. In this part of the podcast, we're going to be revisiting what we talked about last week, because we love a good old rant about the state of terrain. But the good people of Games Workshop have seen fit to put out a Warhammer community article whereby they show quite categorically definitive imagery and talk to what the terrain is within the competitive game of 40k. And I'll be the first to admit, Phil, it appears I was wrong. Clearly, GW intends for terrain to be like this, because at their additional effort and expense, I don't know if this is Photoshoppery necessarily, but they've made it clear that Windows need not apply when it comes to the game of Warhammer 40,000. I mean, how do you feel about all of this, Phil?
Well, as we speculated, the one ruined terrain piece, which is the Mechanicum, I don't know what it's called, Manufactorum or something. The Mechanicum looking one, that's what they're using. Yeah. Hence why all the doors and windows are blocked up. But it has
the least amount of windows and doors, but they have made sure to block out any that may be there.
Yes, I assume that's what they've done, and they've sort of said they've said that there's 3 types of terrain pieces. Terrain piece 1 is the one that physically blocks line of sight, in addition to having the obscuring rule. So those are the U-shaped ones. So I guess there are certain elements within that U shape on the sides, for example, where they don't always block the actual physical line of sight. So I presume in those situations you can still be shot at, for example, around a far side or the rear, for example, and it's only that front side and a bit of one of the sides where it completely blocks it from view. You got a second type of much smaller ruin which has windows in and not quite doors. It's just a bit more open. So they've said if you go on those pieces, you'll get your cover saved, but you'll still be able to shoot and be shot at. And then the last piece is the dense terrain, which is a weird one because they've used the Nurgle Chimley piece and the Nurgle trees. And it pretty much fills up the space of the sort of area terrain, so you can't really easily be on it. And the way it's positioned, it seems like, especially in the first setup where they're pretty much in the corners, you can't really be behind it either. I mean, you could maybe put 1 or 2 characters in literally the corner of the table, but otherwise, in one of the setups, they seem completely pointless. In the second setup, where they're at effectively like the north south, like the middle points of the table on each side, that actually seems quite useful there, because that is basically covering a shooting lane from one side of the board to the other. So I think in that one, it's a good example. In the first one, it feels like they've just tucked it out of the way to the point of being a bit useless. But I mean, I guess this is all proviso and potentially still subject to change. And they have said that they'll use these terrain layouts for these ones, and then going forwards, they might change things around a bit for future events, and I guess based on feedback and stuff as well. I mean, in terms of what I think about it, though, I think the U-shapes that block line of sight could potentially be really bad for the game, because it just means close combat units can really dominate those center objectives, especially in the one where all the U-shapes are clustered together. It's less of an issue for the second layout that they've shown, where they're quite far apart, and it's like, that's fine for your deployment zone. People will literally be parking their whole army in there, depending on the deployment, actual deployment zones, if they get that piece of table. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'm happy to wait and see. And I think what will be interesting is obviously you're getting 3 massive tournaments out of this for feedback. So it'll be quite apparent if it really affects the meta or not, or what the general feedback from people are that are going to these events.
So I think one of the things that's quite interesting with it. So first of all, I feel like it is yet another example of a bad time for anyone who is still trying to fly the flag for the Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights, or any of the large super heavy armies out there, simply because there's very little room for them to interact with this terrain, and seemingly they can be shot from just about everywhere. I mean, one thing you could...
Yeah, I'll just interrupt for a second. They do explicitly state in the article, like, things like knights and big Tyranid models can get to any point on the board. They won't be blocked off, but they might not be able to just go there in a direct manner. They might have to go, as we say, in a crow's manner. They might have to make a little wander around to get there. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see. But you are right, I guess for the purposes of the obscuring rule, they can be shot at regardless, right? Because they're over 18 years.
Yeah, so like with the broadly accepted kind of standards for the big L's, they were big enough that you could still line of sight block hide Imperial Knights behind them. In most instances, not all, but you could in most instances put the Imperial Knight behind that. But also with the way the big L was situated, there was a certain level of kind of like, mobility based on the idea of kind of rotating around that shape. Whereas the rigidity of these blocks essentially funnels the knight into 3 channels. It can either go through the middle, round to the left, round to the right, and essentially it has to move in this kind of like figure of 8 formation to try and interact with different parts of the board, which greatly reduces its efficiency in terms of its movement. But also the problem it has is that obviously every other army is going to be heavily, heavily benefiting from the fact that there is so much line of sight blocking terrain in their deployment zones or nearby that, getting those lines is actually going to be even more difficult, because that's the other thing about the L shape, which is crazy that I'm arguing that the L shape is potentially still a better solution, because, I mean, it's very subjective, but at the same time, I've not been the biggest, supporter of it up to this point. But at least I suppose with the L shape, you're open on 2 sides of it.
I mean, the U shape sort of are like that, because it's the front face and one of the sides are pretty much completely blocking, which is the L shape, and then the other side is partially open. So there's a bit of cover from the very front, but then it gets broken up. So it is a bit. It's like it's an L and a half.
It's more like actually one line of sight blocking wall, and then the side sort of supporting structures are actually quite see-through. But even then, with that in consideration, if you commit something to the middle pathway, the movement and the opportunities to gain those lines of sight is going to be quite reduced for the Imperial Knight players. And then your only real option then is that you end up doing lots of flanking maneuvers. But then your opponents, once they figure that out, because you can very quickly kind of discern when you just think for about a moment what the options are to Imperial Knight, what they're going to do, and then by extension you can build strategies to further neutralize their functionality.
Yeah, I imagine
so bad
you
for those guys.
I imagine as a knight or as a non-knight player up against a knight army, you can kind of run rings around the knights, because if they're going to, especially if they've got a close combat knight, for example, they're going to go down one of these channels to get you from one of those kind of sides of the U shape, for example. And then you're like, cool, I'll just run to the other side.
Yes.
And it's like, you can't go through it, I presume, and it would take you more than like a turn to go around it, because it will take, you can't just, so basically it's like you can just sort of it's like that kind of comedy cartoon where you're both running around a tree or something and you're being chased around. I can imagine that sort of situation happening.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a very bad terrain layout for Imperial Knights because they can't interact with it at all, and they can just get shot from everywhere.
Well, I mean, worse if you're a guard player with a Baneblade that you want to run, because it's like you're hemmed in even more because they are pretty big. So yeah, you definitely won't see any of those people running the free Baneblade Shadow Sword type lists that you did of yonder years. Not to say that was a particularly good list, but you definitely won't see that anymore. And even with one, your firing arcs are going to be pretty depleted, and you definitely won't be able to get to make use of that juicy crush them stratagem by getting that tank up in close combat, because it just won't fit anywhere.
Yeah. I think the problem is with these types of terrain setups, and the game in general, right? It's like the idea that it's almost like an hourglass or a pipette, where the idea is that you kind of, you have the bulk of your force in a location, and then you can kind of just drip feed elements of it into other areas of the table. And obviously when you're in a heavy infantry versus heavy infantry matchup, that becomes very different, because obviously it's a different style of thing. But yeah, the idea and what I'm trying to say is you can kind of load up large chunks of your army into these U shapes, as we're calling them now, and then just feed out what you need to accomplish your goals every turn. And it does just literally become like that scene in the end of Naked Gun 2, where Norberg and one of the random villains are shooting back and forth at each other off of a little box, and they're getting, and then Norberg progressively increases the size of his gun. But in this instance, increasing your size of your gun is only going to work to your detriment, because the bigger you are, the worse it is for you in this scenario. But the point is that when I look at this terrain layout, there are things I like about it. I like the fact that actually when you can see it in reality, you do immediately realize that for the assaulty based armies, they do have to actually now cover a reasonable distance. So when you look at the second of the two layouts, which has the two ruins kind of diagonally placed in the middle, it's quite clear that there is a decent amount of distance between those big ruins. And that does create a bit of a dynamic where your assault units are at least needing to risk something, because at the moment I find with a lot of like the more consistent tournament structures, the distance between ruins is too marginal to be meaningful. So it was always like, oh, these ruins are like 12 inches apart, which essentially for a jump infantry figure meant that they were guaranteeing themselves charges every turn, which, so they basically suffered no penalties and then very easily dealt with that. As a result, I actually feel like the optimal distance between these kind of large features is at least 18 inches, ideally 20 inches, because then with a 12-inch move, you need to succeed with an 8-inch charge, which feels like a meaningful gambit. It feels like a meaningful bet. Whereas when you know that you could just close the gap and charge, it's a bit crazy.
Yeah, but the top one, it looks like that's the one where the 4 U-shapes are all together, it does look like if you're in any one of those, you can charge any of the others, and kind of effectively avoid Overwatch because they're all blocked up and stuff, and you've got a real pylon in that middle sort of, I presume, center objective potentially.
Yeah. The top one is much more in keeping with standard competitive play, whereas the bottom one actually looks more interesting.
Oh yeah,
I will say
bottom
this,
one
though,
I like the most though.
Yeah, but I will say this though, for immersion purposes, what has happened that those two buildings that are now ruins used to be there? I mean, what kind of city layout am I looking at here?
Yes,
that they used to be like that.
Yeah, the fact that they're at an odd angle to the other buildings doesn't really make sense. And in fact, what I would rather they do is if they took the big U-shaped ruins and just twisted them like, what is it, like 20 degrees or something, so they're in alignment with the others. But then so everything's, and I do like it, and they do it at Warhammer World when they offset all the ruins to like 45 degrees to the actual table, it looks so much more interesting than when everything is perfectly square, because square ultimately just looks a bit wrong. It's just a bit too neat and natural, unnatural, whereas if it's slightly off center or off kilter, it looks actually a bit more natural for some reason. So yeah, if they'd have done that, it's still doing its purpose of blocking those line of sights. But what it does mean is you can't, if you're doing like a Dawn of War deployment, have all your models butted right up against the wall, because actually some of them would be out, and the distances would make a bit of a difference if that piece is angled. Yeah,
it's just weird. It just looks weird, and don't get me wrong, I understand that's not anyone's major concern here, because the terrain is functional for the game as opposed to being thematic, but it is weird. It just looks very strange to me. But again, as a layout, I prefer it to the top one. How surprised are you, though? I know you mentioned it already, but how surprised are you that they didn't go with the trees? Like, I would have thought that for the obscuring area terrain, we would have seen some trees, but the fact they've gone with these Nurgle options, it's very strange, again, from a thematic kind of visual perspective.
Yeah, well, I guess it sort of makes sense because they don't do trees anymore. The one tree set that they do is it's not Luminef, it's the Silvernef. Is that right?
Silvernef, yeah. But it is a generic tree set.
Yeah, but it's like 3 trees that are sort of
they're in
boomerang
a circle, right?
shapes that you bring together to form a piece of area terrain. I mean, I guess they could have taken one piece, broken off the base bits and stuck it down. And I think they've gone, that's too much work. Let's find something more 40k that we can just put on. So it sort of makes sense. Like the chimney bits, they've gone with the idea it's like dense pieces to represent dense terrain, as opposed to let's just do woods. Even though the old classic kind of wood set would almost be more appropriate, but they just don't make it anymore. So I sort of understand why they've done that. I just find it weird in the top layout. It just feels like it's not very useful, because it's almost going to be impossible to interact with that terrain piece. Whereas
you're not going to be able to have any meaningful in-game interactions with it in any way, shape, or form. Like the only thing those things are there for is -1 to hit obscuring stuff. But the problem is that they're not anywhere meaningful where that would even take place. It's not like you.
If they tucked them in more or had them in the similar positions as the bottom one, it would make more sense. I mean, the only time it would be useful is if you're coming in from deep strike and you can deploy a 5-man squad maybe behind it in that corner. That is like the only time I can think you're going to end up getting a cover save or a -1 to hit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's just very odd. It's sort of almost like, again, it's like window dressing, right? It's like it's almost completely meaningless in this setup, but they've just put it in because it's like, well, can't just have just the big things in the middle. We need something just because we need something.
Well, I think they've gone, these are the terrain pieces for the event, and we're going to move them around, shuffle them around for the 2 different options, and they've kind of gone, oh, well, we still need to keep them on the table. We can't take them off. So let's just tuck them out of the way in the corners. I sort of wish they would move them in just a little bit, and then they might be a bit more useful. I mean, in theory, they should know what they're doing. This is someone that's run tournaments before. They're working now for Games Workshop. I assume they know what they're doing in terms of why they've placed them there, even though for me, looking in as an outsider, I'm like, this seems a bit confusing. So yeah, I'd be interested to see what they do with it. I'm willing to give them the benefit of a doubt, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting for sure in terms of your perspective on it. I think you never know, but I think when you look at it, I mean, again, as I was sort of trying to say earlier, this isn't as bad as Warhammer Fest of 2017, or was it? Yeah, it was 2017 Warhammer Fest where we rocked up and the tables were literally one crate, one little ruin, and one of those bunker networks or like trench networks.
Yeah.
It was like a 6x4 board on a dodgy like trestle table with a singular piece of terrain on it, basically. So yeah, it was abysmal. So compared to that, this is much better. And if they are going to be using these clear perspex plastic bases in all instances, I don't hate it. I think it's perfectly fine. Again, the thing that is most interesting to me, and again, obviously not knowing for sure how they're going to implement this, is the fact that, they've definitely gone with the kit that has the least amount of windows. And then obviously they have blocked up what windows there are. I'm curious, one, how they've done it. And I'm curious, two, what that says about Games Workshop's terrain system and what this means for the company's kind of perspective on this stuff going forwards. Because essentially, whether they mean it this way or they don't, it is an open admittance that their terrain system isn't fit for purpose, which is a really interesting situation because there are 101 different third-party retailers with more appropriate terrain solutions for the way 40k is, quote, supposed to be played. So is Games Workshop now just resigning itself to the fact that, I guess we'll just sort of have to take a bit of a hit on that while we come up with some new stuff? Or do they just think that this is a relative niche and that ultimately they have to make the best of a bad situation when it comes to what they have and what they plan to do in the future with it?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Who knows? Like, they could well come up with new terrain, and they might well do, for next year, for example, do basically what everyone else is doing, like the LGT London Grand Tournament. Like, you can buy our official tournament pack of terrain so you can play at home. Like, if Games Workshop did that and carried on doing these tournaments, I imagine that would be quite popular. Although at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if just loads of people would buy whatever MDF knockoff some other company ends up producing, because it'll be far, far cheaper than what Games Workshop would sell. It's a bit of a weird sort of admittance that the terrain doesn't work, but maybe it's just it doesn't work for matched play grand tournament style events where they, it's not meant to be narrative. It's not meant to be even interesting looking. It needs to be functional. I mean, it looks, I don't know, in a way the board looks a bit boring, but it's really boring. It's well painted. It's really nice terrain pieces. It's better than what you'd get at other tournaments where it's like foam walls or MDF that's unpainted or something, for example.
Well, that MDF stuff comes painted sometimes now, doesn't it?
Well, that's true. Yes. But the fact that they're on bases is an interest. I get it. I get why it means that the ruins.
It's transportation, right?
Yeah, but also so you can easily move them around, and all of a sudden your area terrain isn't getting bigger or smaller because someone's shuffled the back L that forms a corner piece of their U shape to a different size. So it is. I like that it gives you distinct and it's quite clear when you're on area terrain, when you're off of it, when you're shooting through it and not, because it's like, well, it's got a base, I can physically see through it, I can see it. What will be interesting is where you get these slightly odd positions where you can be stood in front of the wall and still technically get a cover save because the base does extend out from where the wall is. I mean, it is relatively tight in some places, but where you've got the red outer facing wall, and it's joining the cylinder type piece of terrain, like that wall is at least an inch back from the edge, so you could easily be stood on it on the front and get a cover save. And maybe that's fine, maybe that's how they want it to be played. I always think that's a bit weird, but I mean, again, it's less about immersion and more about functionality and balance. So maybe that's okay.
Look, I mean, for me, I'm not a fan of touching cover, but at the end of the day, the rules for cover is that if you're wholly within it, or not even wholly within it, if you're within it, that you get a cover save. Therefore, if you're going to put a base on it, and I'm within the confines of the base, and the base is defined as being the area of terrain, then fine. Do I like it that way? No, because again, it's an oversimplification, and I don't overly appreciate that massively. But at the end of the day, if that's what everyone's playing to, that's everyone's playing to. And again, I've always come to the same consensus of, personally, for pickup games or normal games, unless, the TO has specified it beforehand, I get annoyed when people assert a rule based on the fact of, oh yeah, but that was how they ruled it at a completely different event. That's where I've gotten a bit like, yeah, but that's not the rule.
What was interesting is with Games Workshop in the tournament pack, they specifically say any ruling that a judge makes is only valid for that one particular ruling. It's not a precedent that then is set in stone for other events.
But good luck convincing anyone that that's not the case when it comes from official GW events. But obviously, look, I get it. But anyway, I think the terrain situation is interesting. I'd be intrigued if G-Dubs came along and went, here's like a resin kit of blast door plugs or something. So it's like, seal up your buildings, for competitive play. And, maybe at some point in the future did like a nice competitive bundle where you could get all of the bits to make all of the terrain that
people would probably love
use. Honestly, I imagine it'd be a good seller for them. And I mean, that's cool. I think this is the thing, right? All I can say is this: is up until now, I've been relatively, negative about certain things around the way that, the kind of competitive scene is defined and dictated the way the game should be played. Because up until now, I've seen no official endorsement from GW that supports that belief. But this is it. So, I am now very clearly of the opinion that this is how, at a competitive level, the game is intended to be played, because this is how it is intended. And that's fine. At the end of the day, I might not enjoy this style of gameplay that this kind of terrain and this kind of mechanical gameplay stuff delivers, but I can freely admit when I'm wrong, and, I was wrong. This is exactly what Games Workshop intended when they made the 9th edition mission set.
Well, I don't actually think that's the case. I think this is...
How can you doubt it anymore?
Well, because I believe
tangible evidence.
Well, I believe Mike Brandt joined Games Workshop sort of at the start of 9th. I don't think he was around at the inception of the rules to have an impact on this is how the game is meant to be played. I think this is his interpretation of this is how the game should be played based on the current rules, not necessarily, and that's him as a tournament organizer, not as the Games Workshop rules writers per se.
But you've got to assume he's heavily involved with all those guys though, right? I mean,
well, I'm sure, but I also think they're like, this is tournament play. This is how tournament play should be played. It's not open play. It's not narrative play. It shouldn't even be the casual play at your local club or local Games Workshop, for example. But I think there will, and we talked about it in the last episode, there will be that trickle down of this may well be what people end up always wanting to play, because even if they're not going to a tournament, people might want to practice for one, or even if they're not, they're just assuming it's for standard. I think the one disappointing thing about the terrain is there's no obstacles and barricades. And that, I think, actually has a real impact on how the game gets played. I mean, I sort of get it from maybe a practical point of view. Having all these long pieces stuck down to perspex might be a bit too much of a faff to move around. Or, there's not even any craters either, which could have been useful. So it feels like there are elements out of all the terrain options that you've gone for effectively 2 pieces. And one of those is broken down into 2 types. It's basically ruins and dense cover. And that's it. And one of them just blocks line of sight and one of them doesn't. But functionally, for the most part, very similar. But there's all these other types of terrain that he could have used, but for whatever reason, they've decided not to. So hopefully in the future, we'll see more of those other bits of terrain trickle into the map layouts.
I mean, one thing I will say, and I know it's not practical, as I've said many times before, when it comes to putting on events, but verticality is still quite important to me within the game of 40k, and I do think that it is my humble opinion that the best 40k boards have a ground floor, or like a basement level, like a low level, a ground floor, and a first floor, as it were. I think the most optimal scenario is areas where you can descend the general floor area and then ruins and things when you can ascend. And I think that's where the game actually really comes into its own. And I also do think that like walls and things are really important over and above ruins, because I think ultimately creating like little interesting choke points or creating decision making between opponents is why I always loved like the Zone Mortalis stuff, and why I like the idea of using that within the game of 40k, because I like walls, because I think the rules of a wall is quite understandable. It's a physical barricade, something that you can't pass through, but you can't see through it either. But there are reasons why you might find it necessary to reside within those. And again, the verticality, I think, adds a lot of interesting elements to it. But again, I accept that adding that to your average tournament game is impossible. But
on those big ruins, there is a top floor that you can stick some models on, not like a huge amount. Like you could maybe get a 5-man squad up there best. But but one of my favorite things, when you're setting up a deployment, is to go, oh, where's my heavy weapon team? I'm going to stick them up on like a crow's nest in some ruins to get a line of sight. Or this is where my assassin's going. On this one, it seems like that's really not going to happen all that much, just based on the layout, and the amount of upper floor you get isn't a huge amount. But in a way, I get it. Okay, that's what it is. What it is. Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I think unfortunately we're limited by what is technically feasible en masse, right? If you're going to host an event with 300 tables or however many tables these sorts of events are having, 150, whatever it might be, you got to make some allowances for the amount of stuff you can put on them. You can't have every table looking like one of those beautiful themed boards you see when you go to like wargaming conventions where they're recreating the battles of history. This isn't what you're getting. You're just getting functionality, which is a mat, of a 2-dimensional mat, and some bits of ruin, and that's fine. I get it, and I understand why the competitive community have gone that direction. I understand why Games Workshop have embraced it, and I'll be honest. Again, I love the fact they've embraced it, because it makes my life easier now. I don't have to speculate or concern myself with it anymore. It's like, cool, this is right, and good on them. But one thing I will say, I played a nice game of Open War on the weekend. Good Lord, Open War's a breath of fresh air. I don't know how many of you guys out there who listen to this pod have gotten, a little bit, tired of constantly playing GT mission pack games. But every now and again, just break out Open War. Oh, gives you a whole different perspective on it. Do you know what the score was at the end of the game, Phil?
Was it something like 7-4?
I got into double digits. It was like 12-7,
Ooh.
but irrespective. I mean, here's what happened. At the end of every turn, I scored 1 point for every objective I controlled. And my opponent did the same. Good old Richie, did the same. And at the end of the game, we tallied up. Well, we didn't need to tally up because it was really easy, because it was really easy to remember what we'd scored in the previous turn. I just had one little dice by the side of my table going, that's how many points I've got. And I knew when I was winning and I knew when I was losing, because it was a relatively, referable set of numbers. It was magical. Because I swear to God,
Open War doesn't even do secondaries, does it? Like, because Crusade does the classic style secondaries of, Slave of Warlord and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's brilliant, mate. Loved it. I highly recommend Open War. I think it's great for pickup games and everything else. It's fantastic. We even considered not using stratagems for the game, but in the end we were like, no, that's kind of core. The problem is with the stratagem system, it's so core to the game that if you're not using it, it kind of feels like, it just doesn't feel like what 9th edition without the stratagem system. It's really hollow.
Well, it's interesting. I've started watching it. I've not finished watching it. So SM Battle Reports have done a new narrative style mission, and you'd probably quite like it. It's basically Inquisitor Greyfax, effectively a squad of Custodes, versus a bunch of Poxwalkers. But the Custodes are basically individual units. They're acting as independent models. But so it's like five or six of them in total. Like, it's quite a low point game. But they also agreed that they weren't going to use, they weren't going to use anything other than the core rulebook stratagems, plus a bonus stratagem that they created, which allowed custodians to like always strike first in combat. For like 1 CP, just because like against Poxwalkers, even if Poxwalker charged, custodians should be able to smack them first because they're superhumans. It would totally make sense.
Of course.
So they did that as a narrative. So I've only seen like the initial intro bit, and it was just getting into the game. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that actually plays out. And then they did another narrative game like last month, and that was actually really fun to watch. So yeah, people should check that out and see how it goes.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I just think, again, obviously if you're looking to climb the greasy pole and get up to the, the tippy top of competitive play, then obviously you want to go out and get yourself terrain that looks like this and, practice it to the nines, because it is very complicated to understand. So you do need to get good at getting your head around it. Because truth be told, I've won games of 9th edition. I had no idea that I was winning at any point. Like, I literally just like, is that what happens? Great, cool. Because it's just too much. I have no idea whether I'm winning or losing. I have no idea what's going on. But then I'm an old man who's, bewildered by reality now. Everything.
Off to the home you go.
Exactly. That's it. I was listening to my my spirit animal, Richard Herron, the other day, and he was talking about the transition between being in his 30s to arriving at being 50. And talking about the relative time dilation that occurs and why, how it works that just you wake up one morning and then you're 50. And I can imagine that happening. I mean, I'm still a way off, but, I look forward to embracing it. Dead soon, Phil. Dead soon.
Oh, and then there'll be no more podcast.
There will be no more. I love that's your number one concern at that point. It's like, oh, God, no more podcast.
Highlight of the week. Of course I'll be concerned.
Well, it's fair enough, mate. Fair enough. Would you speak at my funeral? Would you do my? What is it now? No, is it eulogy?
Eulogy, yeah.
Eulogy.
No, fuck.
Would you? Would you say some words?
I hate public speaking, but I'll
Come on, I'm going to put that in my will. Then that's what I want.
Well, as long as I get something good out of it, then it's a deal.
Oh, brilliant! There you go. Not the honor of being asked to speak at one of your best friends. Funeral. I understand.
Well,
I sort of talk
we
about
were
this
more co-workers, Dan.
Well, that is
Not
true.
Friends.
That is true.
Definitely not friends.
I talk about it in that kind of nonchalant fashion. I always worry when you start making comments like this in the public domain that this could form the soundbite for a future terrible story. So someone will be playing this in a montage of "Look Out, Sir" best bits from like a year's time when I've dropped dead. Like, he never saw it coming. Here's his. And if that does happen, please play this at my funeral as well, Phil, because I think it'll add to the fun of it all. There you go. He had a zest for
have you
life.
got any message from beyond the grave to your dear loved ones? Do you want to say it now?
I told you I was ill.
Isn't that on somebody's famous gravestone? I can't remember.
That was. There's the other great joke, which is I want to go out like my old man did, peaceful and asleep, unlike his 100 passengers.
Oh, bit much. And I guess on that note, we can move on to the next segment.
We can. I feel like we've derailed this enough. No pun intended off the back of the joke there, because I mean, to be fair, you'd have to have gone some to then have, resulted in a derailing. I was assuming it was more a bus driver or something of that to that effect. Anyway, I've over-explained it now. Transitional noise. Woo! Hello again, everybody. In this part of the podcast, we're going to try and eke out some sort of content around Warhammer Plus and all of its associated fun and frolics. Phil, that there Warhammer Plus, what you reckon?
Pretty good, actually. I was pleasantly surprised watching.
All right, brilliant. Transitional noise. Or are we going to keep going? We'll keep going. Sorry, Phil.
Keep going. Pleasantly surprised while watching the reveal day. Because if it was just animations, I'll be like, that's not worth it. But they were like, now here's some free stuff. Then here's some more stuff. And then you get some, more stuff on top of that. And then and then they're like, oh, it's only £1 more than you're currently paying for the 40k app. And then you're like, oh, it's
£2 more, Phil. £2 more.
Was it £2 more?
Yeah, $2.99 for the 40k app.
Oh, is it? For some reason I thought it was $3.99.
No. They reduced its price, or at least I think so. I could be wrong about that.
No. Well, yeah. So it's $4.99 a month, or $5.99 US, or for a year it's $49.99 or $59.99 US. So
a saving of £9.98 here in the Britons, and then a saving of $9.98, whatever the smaller division of dollars are. Cent? Yes, cents.
Yeah. So it seems like quite a good deal overall, especially if you go. Well, so is it the main? Well, one of the main laws is the free mini, right? And they're like,
I mean, you're jumping all around the place now, Phil. So there's a free mini as well. What's going on?
Well, exactly. Let's talk about.
Should we try and say what's in there in its entirety? So basically, what you're getting, according to this breakdown of bullet points on the Warhammer Community article, you have a wealth of Warhammer animation. Ooh, weekly in-house Warhammer hobby shows. And those were said to be things such as a lore video by that guy who also does podcasting and or hosts thing. What's his name? Wesley?
No. Oh God, I know it. And
is it not Wesley?
No, it's
I've completely forgotten his name.
My mind's gone blank.
Archibald?
Sorry. No, it'll come back.
Okay, well, you got that guy. He does the Flesh Terrors, man of high social standing.
Yeah.
Within the Warhammer community side of things, whatever his name might be, I can't believe that's just left my brain as well. It's not like he's a real life friend of mine or anything to that extent. He isn't genuinely. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that with an air of sarcasm. I don't know who he is. So I mean, I do know who he is, but I don't know him personally. So that's relatively excusable that I forget what his name is. Wade! It's Wade, Phil. It's Wade.
God, yeah. Wade Price. And, best wishes to Wade, because I know he was in hospital quite recently. That's why he wasn't on the show. Yeah, he had a punctured lung.
Jesus.
So he, or collapsed lung, maybe not punctured. It was collapsed, so he was in hospital, and that was why he missed out on the show.
Wowzers.
And I have to say, I really like him. I really like when he does the podcast episodes. He's super knowledgeable. He does know a lot of lore, and he's done some really cool stuff on Twitter and stuff, like answering people's questions and then going to like deep dives on different stuff. So I think Lore Masters as a concept is fantastic. It's
I
that I probably watch religiously every week.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be well good at those. I've been listening to a lot of Wolflord Row when it comes to lore stuff lately. Although it's quite funny with Wolflord Row because he literally, as a video, just kind of just goes, "Here's a segment of a story," and I'm just going to gush over it. So I just find it quite amusing just hearing him. And he always has the same intro where he goes, "And we get to support the Great Games Workshop and all of this great lore," or something to that effect. It's a terrible impression, but nonetheless, Wolflord Row, check him out. He's all right. It's not quite at the same level as old Luton, but pretty reasonable. But maybe all of those guys are now rendered redundant because you're going to have Wade do a lore segment, which is going to be quite cool. So that's good. And they've also got painting masterclass is something they're doing as well, right? So they've got her that
Louise Sugden, who used to work for Forge World.
No, you didn't struggle to remember her name. I'm noticing there, Phil.
No, I remember that one.
You remember that one? There it is, straight in there. She always seems so lovely, though, doesn't she? I mean, I enjoy her contributions to the live streams lately, where she just sort of seems overly excited about everything that's happening. It's quite nice to see someone genuinely passionate about things. Not that they are others are.
It's the opposite of a grumpy old man, basically.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's all sort of fresh, shiny, and new. So it's quite exciting on that front. And then outside of that, you've also got quite interestingly, you're going to have Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40,000 battle reports. And the gentleman that they have brought in to do that is some individual who used to contribute to a relatively small battle report channel, who has managed to land the position of producing or assisting in the general production of these bat reps, which is great for him.
I can't remember his name, but I think it was like Moloch Warzone or Warzone Moloch.
Okay.
Because the Rapid Fire War Game has recognised him and mentioned it, and I then looked it up to watch a couple of their videos, of which he was a regular contributor to.
I mean, again, I think, great for him, obviously, to be joining the team over there and being able to kind of, get more creatively involved in hosting and developing these shows and the relevant formats that they will go on to become. I quite like the idea, though, if they added a bit more of a kind of narrative element to it, not so much in terms of the game, but actually just in terms of like turning them into almost like interview shows. Because one of the things that I always feel like is under-publicized within games of 40k when played out on the internet is the actual kind of friendly bants that goes onto it. You get to know a lot about people when you play games of 40k against them, and I always feel like that's really poorly communicated in battle reports. So I quite like the idea of like doing almost like pseudo interview segments where you get people on from the studio and play games with them, but it's not so much about the game, but more about the back and forth between the two players as the game is playing out. So it has elements of
it's like the Hot Ones show, but instead of Hot Wings, it's 40k. Like each turn, it's a new question.
Yes. Yeah. Each turn there's a new question they're answering as they're playing their way through it. And obviously as the game is getting further and further along, it's getting spicier and spicier in terms of whether or not they're winning or losing. Can they contain their disappointment, or can they rein in their pride and excitement at having crushed their opponent?
I mean, if they don't do this format now, I feel like we need to go ahead and do it, because it's a great idea.
That's true. We could become the While We Feast of While
We 40k.
While We 40k.
It makes itself.
You need to get on. I got to get on and make that YouTube channel before this podcast goes out there, because if I don't, someone else is going to have it.
Exactly.
And then we could do a burger show as well.
Well, and just eat burgers for the fun of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Make burgers, have a good time. I've gotten into anyway. I'm not going to get into my talk about my burger making lately. Although you had that as well, though, Phil, didn't you? You did like Burger Friday for ages, right?
Yeah. I still occasionally do, but not as often as I did in the past.
Not now that Joe Wicks owns your soul.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, yeah. So a load of interesting hobby shows, which is super cool. Can I just say, I feel bad that Joe didn't apply to become the battle report host. He could have been perfect for it. How did that not happen?
I know.
Poor old Joe.
Never
gets a break.
Yeah, I think. What one are you most excited for out of the three?
well done on changing the topic there. Let's not just rail on Joe any longer. Oh, the free. Genuinely, it's Lawmaster that I'm most excited of. I think Wade is an individual who's demonstrated a huge in-depth knowledge. I think I've watched many a live stream where he's poured through his back catalogue of almost every issue of White Dwarf, and he's, possesses such incredible knowledge on the hobby in general. But I think with some professional production and access to Games Workshop's extensive library of artwork and visual aids, as it were, I think the production could just be phenomenal. Because the library that GW have in terms of all of their content is greater than what resides within the
it's like
the archives of Google.
The IP is their sort of their strongest element, and that is kind of the lore, the history. It's not just the pretty models, it's actually all the background that is almost what gets you into 40k more than anything else. So I think that's the show I'll watch every week, but I think the one I'll find most useful is potentially the Citadel Masterclass, because I really liked when Darren Latham did his YouTube channel, and even like this week I've been going back and referring to some of them for some of my Minotaurs that I'm painting up, and this is that kind of quality. What's interesting is, so she's Louise is like a super talented painter, but her art style is normally like super bright and colorful, almost very like rainbow-esque. And I'm glad they post up some examples of her doing like just really good quality, almost like heavy metal style. And it's like, she's not an heavy metal painter, which I think is in a way it's a bit of a shame, but at the same time, I think she is to that standard, and she is painting into that style. So I think, whatever she's going to produce, I think those videos, I probably won't watch every one, but I'll watch the ones I need when I want to do a specific thing. I think they'd be super useful to have.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? You want to have a handy, catalog, and I think that's the thing that Warhammer TV already gives us, is a really good series of tools. So the Warhammer Plus stuff with the added kind of more advanced techniques could be really interesting. I've definitely been watching a lot of Duncan Rhodes Institute stuff, where he's experimented with lots of different kind of like styles, or able to kind of obviously paint other types of miniatures, and it's always really interesting seeing his perspective on all of this stuff. So the idea of that being expanded to Warhammer Plus is definitely cool. And also, this is something we haven't gotten around to talking about, but this is the next bullet point, which is a digital vault of classic Warhammer publications and White Dwarf issues. I think of everything, that is the most exciting feature to this thing. The idea of a library of, an official resource to be able to gain access to all of these classic pieces of literature is incredible, especially old White Dwarfs. I know I was at home a couple of weeks ago, and my mum came out with a box of old Warhammer stuff, which included a few old White Dwarf issues. And these were like White Dwarf issues from like the late 90s. And it's just incredible flicking through the pages of old White Dwarfs and just, looking through the old articles and rules and, getting these kind of deep dives on, the types of models that they're supporting at that time and what new releases were coming through. And the issue, it was hilarious. It was one where they were waxing lyrical about the new Catachan plastic kits, which I was like, this is hilarious, because now in the light of 2021, they're the most dorky kit available. It's like literally like people look at the Catachan kit as like an illustration of when Games Workshop goes bad or whatever, or like models that are really too old. But seeing it through the prism of like late 90s, where they're like, wow, look at all the stuff you can do with this plastic kit. And they're doing all the conversions where they're putting like extra nonsense on their head and doing all this crazy stuff. And it was like, wow, okay, cool. So that was quite exciting to come across. So for me, that's easily the most exciting thing, because I'm one of the lunatics that keeps hold of all the old books. So having digital versions of those is a big plus to me, I'd say.
Yeah, so with the White Dwarf, they're currently just doing up to 2020, so it'd be like the really recent stuff, and but they have said they're going to be adding to it constantly. And obviously, when it comes to 40k, it's basically looks predominantly 6th, 7th edition, maybe mostly 7th edition, and then AOS is 1st and 2nd edition stuff. What will be really exciting is when they go back into older editions of 40k, older, 1990s, 1980s editions of White Dwarf. I'm sure they'll slowly do it, but they're drip that content out. But it'd be really useful when that stuff comes around.
Do you suspect, though, when it comes to old rules-related stuff, do you think they're going to prune that out of the books and just leave us with the substance, as it were? It's going to be lore and background and, narrative and artwork, and all the rules are just going to get stripped out.
I don't know, because like for example, they're examples of Montcar Gathering Storm. Obviously, does have rules in it, so we'd be able to see straight away, I guess. If they just kept the lore and took out that's probably more work for them, right? They've got digital PDFs of this stuff already that would have included, or EPUBs, because they did the EPUBs back in the day. That would have included the rules, so it's almost more effort for them to take it out. Will they do it to then go, no, we don't want you playing old editions of the game? I think that'd be a bit disappointing. I
don't think they necessarily worry about you playing old editions of the game, but I just think it's just about the streamlining of it, because again, it just gets confusing, right? Like, I think to them, again, if I was doing this, I'd be thinking, well, what's the point of that? Is it that we want people to have access to old editions? Then fair enough. Then that's the thing. But it really depends what the goal is. If it is that we just want to make all this incredible lore available to people who wouldn't be able to gain access to it because they have no reason to want to buy the Gathering Storm, because as a book or a series of books, it contains a lot of rules that are relevant for people in playing modern 40k. So to that extent, do we just release something that is just the lore? And I think that is most likely what they might do, but I hope they don't. I hope they just give us the whole thing. But then if they are going to do that, why doesn't the Warhammer Vault start with the 7th edition rulebook? And you know what I mean? Like, because all of a sudden you're just going to give me a bunch of stat lines that, what is all this? Like, where's the movement characteristic? What does I stand for?
I mean, maybe it's, but as you said, I think it is probably predominantly for lore, but and I think that Gathering Storm was like the last 7th edition supplement. I can't remember quite where the Montcar one and the Hour of the Wolf sat into it. I think they were kind of mid.
They were in the build up to it, yeah.
So
it was,
I think
it was the
just
Devastation of Baal, or the Leviathan books, and then there was an Orc one as well. So there's an Orc one which was like Orcs versus Space Wolves with Imperial Guard.
This one. So that Hour of the Wolf was Sanctus Reach, which is part what this was, and this campaign supplement, that one. I think they're just going, we'll give them the most recent and we'll work our way back, and that's what we're doing with White Dwarf. We'll give them the most. What's interesting with White Dwarf is I've been obviously collecting them I've been subscribed for the last, since I got back into the hobby, basically, so 7 years. I've got tons of White Dwarfs just lying around because I can't bear to get rid of them. Maybe now, my dear, not departed, my dear partner will be quite happy that I might just ditch these physical copies that are just taking up so much space on my
there's some dark overtones to this episode of Lookout Sir podcast here, Phil. We're taking on some strange taking it to strange places.
I know
we're taking jazz to new places.
In one hand, it's like I love physical copies of the White Dwarfs because it's so much easier just to flick through them, right?
Of course.
Skim read them, and even now I'll look through not even old ones, there's ones that are like a couple of years old, and I'll just look through stuff, and I want to keep some issues just because there's some really fantastic articles in them, or like inspiration for how to convert things up. But if they're all digital, I'm like, oh, brilliant! It might actually just be worth me ditching my physical copies and sticking like with a digital back catalogue, while not as fun in a nostalgic way, infinitely more practical.
I think so. But at the same time, I mean, there's pros and cons for both, I'm sure. But we'll see what happens on that front. But I'm excited for that. It's a good feature.
Yeah, I think that was like when they were going through the order of the announcements, this was like the cherry on top. You're like, oh my God, no, this is a cool concept.
Yeah. No, I definitely like that. I think that's a really great addition. Full access to Warhammer apps. So that's the Warhammer 40,000 app and the Warhammer Age of Sigmar app. I can't remember what the Age of Sigmar app used to be called. It was something like Azera or something like that.
Azure, but Azure was the it's the part of the AOS app where you subscribe. I think it was 99p a month for the Battle Scribe sort of style build, the army builder. So obviously, I've seen loads of people online kind of going, "Wait, you're getting rid of an old app that was either free or cost only £1 a month, and now you're going to be charging me like £4 or £5 or whatever." How much this new one's going to be rage. But obviously it's a completely different app. It's probably going to be based on the 40k one and a bit of a reskin to an extent. So this is going to be better, right? In theory, it should work. Should be better. So obviously costs a bit more. What's interesting, and I haven't really seen it clarified, is will you still be able to subscribe to these apps without paying for Warhammer Plus? So if you do just want to pay $3.99, let's say, for the 40k app, could you do that? And they haven't answered that question yet.
I assume you will be able to, because at the end of the day, if you don't really want to take advantage of the broader attributes of Warhammer Plus or the broader offering of Warhammer Plus, but you want to gain access to, just the 40k app, then fine. But I think people doing that would probably... I mean, again, we're talking about a relatively small increase, but then at the same time, it depends what you're going to get out of this service. And I think we'll wrap that up when we kind of get to the conclusion part of it. But I think, I can see a reason why you wouldn't want to go all in, and you might just want to stay in your lane when it comes to sticking with a certain type of application. But
yeah, I guess if you play both systems, then this is a bargain because you're saving yourself more money in theory.
Yeah, theoretically, yeah. I mean, it depends how much value you derive from everything that's being offered to you, I suppose, and how much you're going to get out of it. One of the things that's really interesting to me as well is the premium access to our official events. So that gives the impression that this is going to be a early access or potentially a kind of tiered ticketing system where they're going to make tickets available early, or an allocation available earlier to the kind of Warhammer Plus consumer base, and then they'll release it to general consumers after the fact. Or have they said more about what this is
so in the tagline they say, if you're going to an event, we want to make you feel like a champion at each event you attend, and then they actually clarify, so you're going to get perks such as VIP badges, whatever, priority access and free merch.
So what's priority access mean? They're gonna
priority access, I do assume. Well, this is the thing. Does priority access means you get to skip the queue for registration? That long queue at Warhammer World.
That's where it's where they keep the blackjack and hookers.
Well, yes, yeah. Or does it mean priority access in terms of buying the tickets, or is it only once you're going to the? Because when they talked about it on the stream, they were very much like, we want you to feel like a superstar when you come to the event, and it was very much like when you're at the event, you get VIP treatment. But I think that's, if you're going to a Warhammer World event, surely most of the people are going to have this kind of Warhammer Plus subscription. I almost feel like, not to say that everyone will have it, but if you're also going to events, it feels like you're the sort of person that would probably have bought into this kind of subscription model.
Could you imagine if the VIP access is like then the normal access, and then by extension, like the normal access becomes VIP because it's really like exclusive, and you're just sort of all the VIPs are like penned into their little quarters, rubbed up against each other, going, "Oh, I've got a pin!" While the one guiding bobber is just chilling with loads of space.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. So normally, or not normally, but quite often at these events, you sometimes got little goodie bags. Like one time we've had a cool like dice bag, or some counters for like objective markers that even to this day I still use quite often because they were super handy. And some of the more narrative events, they've given away like cool stuff like tarot cards, style decks like the Emperor's Tarot and stuff. And imagine it's like all of a sudden they don't do that now, and it's exclusive just for these VIP areas. So they're sort of taking what you would have got for free and then they're giving it to you for the premium subscribers. I can imagine that's the sort of offering they're going to do, but now maybe it'd be a bit more consistent in terms of it's going to be at every event if you're a VIP person, as opposed to just randomly once every 3 or 4 events that they just do it for everyone.
Again, it's lots of extra kind of it's relatively straightforward for them to do because they just essentially cordon off stuff that they would have just originally made available to everyone, and now they just sell it to a smaller proportion of people. And then obviously if everyone who attends has access to Warhammer Plus, then fine, it makes no odds. But then at the same time, yeah, it's an interesting idea. If it does mean that you're going to be in an advantageous position to buy tickets to their events, then fair enough. I mean, if that's what they're going for, I mean, at the end of the day, Games Workshop want to attract and or retain, their most, beloved fans, or rather the most kind of, hardcore fans. So yeah, at the end of the day, it makes sense to leverage the events. It's meaningful to the people that are likely to buy this. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I will probably subscribe to this, and I will certainly go to one of their events in the future. So I look forward to being made to feel like a VIP, not having to queue out in the cold and rain outside of Warhammer World like I've done on occasion, which, by the way, now I'm still very much of the opinion that you turn up literally 5 minutes before the final cutoff for registration.
That is the secret VIP access.
Honestly,
you get to skip the queue because there is none, because everyone else has been queuing up for like half an hour. You get to go straight in, get to hand in your little sheet, get your ID and stuff. Yeah, it's the way to do it.
I've driven Joe crazy on so many occasions with that whole situation. I'm like, don't worry about it, man. He's like, but they open the doors at 9. And I was like, yeah, but registration closes at 10. We'll get there at like 5 to 10. It'll be fine. And he's like, no, we must sit in the cold at 8:30 in the morning. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. It's crazy.
Like, I'm much more inclined to be a bit of a Joe about this and be like, oh, no, I want to be there early, so nothing goes wrong, because I'll probably, but at the same time, when we have, once I've gotten over the panic of, oh my God, we're going to be late, and we actually get there and it's a smooth sailing, we go straight in and it's all fine, I'm like, oh, this is the way to go. But my inner panicker struggles to deal with it.
It's understandable. What you got to understand is, Phil, you have to ask yourself this question: will they turn us away if we turned up a couple minutes late for whatever reason? Of course not. We paid to be there. And again, worst case scenario, you and I might turn up and go, hey, yeah, sorry, we just got caught in traffic. Here's our tickets. They go, all right, well, you're just going to have to play each other game 1. All right, no worries. Nice first game.
No worries for you. It's like, oh, I've got 5 to 12 elder flyers. Oh, great. Brilliant.
Yeah, well, that might have been a problem in the old editions. These days, you have a great time. I can't win because I can't interact with the game at all with that many flies. So you'll be fine.
Anyway, going back, one thing we've missed over is the exclusive free mini.
Well, no, it depends on which order you're reading it from, because what you're doing is you're reading the order of the illustrated image.
Yes, okay. So next one is exclusive subscriber offers, which there's no info for, right?
Exactly. We'll give you opportunities to spend yet more money. Well done, you.
Yeah, I guess so. See, just says about okay, cool. And
then a free exclusive Citadel miniature worth at least £25 every year. Every year.
I know they did sneak that every year bit in, because initially it was like you get a free mini, and I was like, wow, like what, after just 1 month, 2 months? It's pretty cool. And then no, after 12 months. It's like,
yeah, you have to wait. You have to wait to get it.
Yeah, so there's a few things with this. If you, I think they're like, if you're already a subscriber to the 40k app, then you get the mini a couple of months early. So I think you get it after, it was either like 8 or 10 months, I think, which is kind of cool. But, no biggie. I mean, at the end of the day, you've paid your money for the year regardless, I assume. And this is the thing, like, if I've paid up for the year in advance, why don't you just give me the money? Sorry, not money, the mini, straight away. Like, why make me wait? Because I've already paid. I presume I can't cancel it and get my money back. So it's like, just give it to me sooner rather than later. But it's a canny, this is the canny business model. This is the one that will stop people from subscribing for a month, going, oh, it's a bit rubbish, and then unsubscribing. Because again, it's like with most things, it will get better over time as more content gets added. The assumption, and we've not really talked about the animations too much, but I got the impression there's a couple of animations to start you off with. Like, there's 2 in the series, and each one may have a couple of episodes each to kick you off. And then the idea is every week there'll be 1, maybe more episodes added on, but maybe not even that. Maybe there'll be weeks when there's nothing. So
yeah,
this is
the
the
plan
one
was
that...
to finish with the chat on animation.
Oh,
to be
well,
fair.
yeah,
It's
well,
sort
we
of like
can
the
do, but
big-
I mean, this is the hook that will stick you to your subscription for longer, because I think it's the one I'm sort of like, it's cool, and I'll take the Vindicare Assassin for sure.
Oh yeah,
But at the same time, I'm less...
I'd pick the Orc.
Oh, would you?
I'd pick the Orc because the Orc is actually a really nice model. The Vindicare looks terrible. Like, don't get me wrong, it's got a nice statue around it, but what a god-awful model that is. The gun is like a comedy water pistol style thing. It looks like he's... like,
that's what they look like, though.
It's awful. The Vindicare looks terrible, and he's not even kneeling or like crouching or anything. He's just sort of awkwardly kind of like propped up on the side of it. No, I don't like the Vindicare model at all. I like the statue that he's situated within, but the
well, this is the thing, because when we initially talked about it, I was like, oh, cool, it's like that old classic piece of artwork where he's kneeling down, and you're like, he's not kneeling down, and I was like, oh yeah, he's not. Because what I might do is get it and convert it so he is kneeling down.
Good luck to you, mate.
Because what I want to do is, I think as a gaming piece, you have to take it away from that statue. I think the statue in itself will make a great piece of terrain. Plonk that on some building, or have it like fallen down up against a wall or something. And then it'll be interesting to see how the Vindicare stands on his own without all the... because at the moment you can only sort of half see it because of the statues in the way. And then it's like, does it work on its own? Does he need to be propped up against something, or does he need to be... Can I easily convert him to be kneeling down a bit more like the classic artwork? That would be cool. But yeah, who knows? I've already got a Vindicare Assassin that I've converted up. I don't really play him all that often. He's sometimes useful. Wait and see if the rules get better.
The Orc is spectacular, though, and what a great mini to give to the Orc guys who were, relatively underwhelmed by the Naughty Boys, or the Crawl Boys, or whatever they're called, to actually give a Iron Jaws War Boss model that is utterly brilliant. I mean, that is a fantastic mini. So yeah, if I was going to get either of them, like, the thing is I'm going to end up subscribing anyway, because I'm already buying into the 40k app, and what's a couple extra quid, because I'm going to want to see what they're doing with their animations and their other content. So based on that, cool, yeah, groovy, I'm in. But yeah, when the day comes to make the choice, I will be opting for the Orc, and I will not be paying to access the Vindicare. I will let that one pass me by.
Yeah, well, I guess, because the interesting thing is, so you get access to both. It sounds like you get one for free, and you have the option of buying the other. And then if you did really want these minis, and I'm a bit nonchalant about them, it's like, it's cool, it's free, I'll take it, but I wouldn't actually probably buy either of them, because as I said, I've already got a Vindicare Assassin. I don't really need a second one. It's a cool model. It looks like an amazing painting piece for, like, to enter into Golden Demon, for example. It looks like a great painting, or nice little paperweight on your desk. That's what it could do really well for.
Except it's made out of plastic, and as a result, super light.
Oh,
okay. You put penny under it as a
exactly.
base.
Yes, yeah, way down the base. Yeah, and it's like, if that's 25 quid, that is literally half of your annual subscription. So it sort of makes everything else feel a bit more of a bargain. I mean, I wonder how many people will just be buying them to then sell for like triple the price on eBay or something, for the people that
maybe
don't want to get a subscription.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like when it comes to the Vindicator Assassin, I just can't see it becoming a particularly big markup item. I think if you're buying these to sell them on, I think you should just approach it as what it is. It's a nice to have, and if you don't want it, fine. Just obviously shift it on eBay, but I can't see you making mad profit out of it. But maybe you will.
Yeah, I mean, I
free.
can imagine a lot of people will subscribe for other reasons, and they have no interest in either model, and therefore people might hit them up like their mates go, "Oh, can can I give you 25 quid?" And that's half their subscription cost paid for. So yeah, cool. Why not? Here, have this. And as we talked about before, when it first came out, we were like, it's quite a cool selection, because actually Vindicator Assassins, like every Imperium army can technically take this model. So
yes,
if you're Sisters, if you're Space Marines, if you're AdMech, technically this model has a purpose for you in your army if you want it.
Yes.
And I do feel like the Vindicator Assassin Mini, the original one, was the weakest out of all 4 assassins. So it's nice that they've given us another variant. I think that's really cool. And then, as you said, the Orc one, yeah, it's for AOS, but you could easily convert this up into a 40k Orc as well, and I'm sure plenty of people will do that. So I like the multi-purpose nature of all of these minis. I don't know if that was deliberate or if that's just like a bit of a coincidence, but it feels like they've gone for minis that can appeal to as many people as possible. And what's cool about it as well is, like, it's not a Stormcast Eternal and it's not a Primaris Lieutenant. It's like, that's cool. Props to Games Workshop for doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's a great decision from that perspective. And yeah, there's always functionality in a Vindicator Assassin. You can always get a lot of usefulness out of it. So from that perspective, yeah, I'm in favor of the Vindicator in that regard. I just look at it as a gaming piece and think like it's just really overly ornate and
very impractical as an actual gaming piece if you're taking it with a statue.
Yeah, and the Vindicator himself is a bit weak, in my opinion, in terms of the pose and the ridiculous gun and everything else. But I will easily acknowledge that the overall silhouette of the miniature is gorgeous. But the thing is that model would only be improved by taking the Vindicator off it. If you use that as a platform for anything else, it would be way better. Like you could have like you could take the what's that Sisters of Battle character called, where she's like the priestess with the megaphones that like chants out nonsense, and she's got like a book held up in the air and she's going like wah. Let me look her up. I'll find out the name while I'm. But yeah, like a Sisters model like that, situated in the up the top there, like screaming out their rhetoric.
Yeah, I know.
Would be quite cool. Or any kind of like. Like ceremonial kind of like thing, like the idea of like, I don't know, like a chaos dark apostle chilling out up there, like screaming out, like as if he's just like, taken over a imperial compound or whatever it is, and has started kind of like preaching his mad ramblings about chaos gods and whatnot. It's called the Dialogus is the name of the model.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, so something like that. There used to be a Space Marine captain that used to have like a megaphone on him.
Yeah, he was one of the chapter masters, I believe, when they did every single chapter master.
Yes, yeah, back in the day. Although I think they do actually still sell those guys now, don't they?
Do you know what? I don't
they're
know.
Just
they
like
used
heroes. To. Yeah. Oh, yeah, they are. Yeah, there you go. But it doesn't. Oh, yeah, they're called Masters of the Chapter. But they don't have Megaphone Man anymore. Megaphone Man has gone away.
Oh, that's a shame.
You don't get Megaphone Man no more. But there you go. Anyway, yeah, so models, obviously a nice hook. Definitely a nice surprise that it was free. I think a lot of people were surprised at how relatively affordable the pricing was of this at $4.99 a month.
Yeah.
Especially when you gain access to the mini. And especially when you consider that up until this point, all we knew of it was it was going to be an animation service. Like so much of our assertion up to this point was based on the idea that this was just going to be a platform for their animations. And I think we all kind of thought that if it's that in isolation, it's not going to really be that valuable.
Yeah.
But I think what we've ended up with is something that's actually much, much better than that. And I will say this as well, Phil, because I think it deserves to be said by a man such as myself who has had his trepidations about certain animations that the GW team or the Warhammer Plus animation studio people have been working on. That their Blood Angel animation with, Blood Angels flying around and fighting Tyranids or whatever it's called. Do you remember what it's called?
Not off the top of my head. I know the one you mean. It's one you've
Blood of
complained
Baal
about.
or whatever it is. Blood. Anyway, that animation, I have been quite rude about it in the past.
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
But I'll tell you what.
You sold.
Right. I'm not going to go out of my way and say it's the greatest thing I've ever seen, but narratively, the first 5 minutes that they released of it really actually engaged me. I was like, actually, this looks like something I could watch. Because again, as I've said many times before, I really liked Hell's Reach by the guy who did this. I thought it was a great fan-made animation on the YouTubes. It's just that I got to a bit of a point of weirdness when I looked at it as like a professional product versus what else was out there. And I thought that some of the early visuals were leaving a lot to be desired. And I still think that in some regards, there's some really weird lip syncing, such as with myself just there. My lips are moving faster than my brain. But the point is that, yeah, what I'm seeing now actually quite compels me. So I'm excited to see it. I think it looks good. I watched a really great, really badly animated, but really great narrative animation the other day called The Last Church on Earth or something, which is about when the Emperor of Mankind visits the last church on Earth and speaks with the priest. And this guy is animated like an hour-long animation based off of that narrative. But as you can imagine, the actual animation quality is relatively so-so, but the narrative is really strong. And that's the thing, I mean, for 40K content, I'm such a fanboy that I can tolerate a lower quality of animation if the narrative is engaging. And also there's a charm to it, because I actually, on a practical level, The Last Church on Earth animation wasn't hugely technically competent, but it was great stylistically, visually. The illustrations that were done, the way it set the tone, the atmospheric sounds, as a fan-made thing on the internet, I thought it was great.
Well, what was interesting about that is it's all very much about the conversation. It is literally two people chatting in a room, so it doesn't need great visuals. Like I had it on while I was sort of painting, and I'd occasionally look at it, but ultimately it's like a radio play. It's like all you care about is the story and the conversation. It's not like Astartes, which is a visual thing where there's sort of a story, but ultimately it's a visual spectacular for your eyes. Where popcorn is being inserted into your eyelids. It's like that is how action packed it is. This isn't that, so it can get away with it. I think the one I got the impression from that one is that it was, I presume it's either taken a short story, or I don't know if they've lifted audio from somewhere and then he's animated on top of it, because I got the impression it's not a unique story, because there was a bit of reference to Black Library at the beginning or end, but I didn't know if I'd just made that up.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that was interesting about Hell's Reach, is that Hell's Reach has taken a lot of the audio from Hell's Reach animation is taken from the audiobook version of Hell's Reach. But in the audiobook version of Hell's Reach, the gentleman who's doing the voiceover voices all the characters, whereas he is, when animating it, obviously had other people voice other characters. So only Grimaldus is only Grimaldus and the other male Space Marine characters are voiced by the guy from the audiobook. But like the female Titan Princeps is voiced by a woman in the animation. And again, it streamlines in nice ways. It's good. It's a good short if you've not seen it. But yeah, no, there's so much great stuff out there, and it's cool to see GW supporting it. I hope these guys who are making this stuff for Games Workshop are getting appropriately rewarded for it. I have no reason to doubt that they're not. I mean, at the end of the day, they're getting to live out their dreams. These are people who who love the hobby, love the narrative, love the world of Warhammer so much that that they're now basically created opportunities for themselves to work for Games Workshop, animating and creating stories that expand the universe, which is just, yeah, it's incredible. And congratulations to them. And genuinely, well done on Games Workshop for creating actually what looks like quite a compelling offer. I know it's not going to be as content rich as other services out of the gate, but I think, they've been pretty transparent about that. And I think we can go into it with eyes wide open. First week, handful of animations, couple videos. Yeah, sure, great. But a year from now, it's going to be a decent library of content. 2 years from now, even better. And as long as they don't drastically hike up the price year on year, I'm genuinely quite impressed with it. I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I think if you're just after the animations, it's probably not worth subscribing, or it's worth subscribing in a couple of months' time. Subscribe for a month, binge watch it all, unsubscribe, and then just repeat that every so often. If that's all you're really after, that's probably, that is obviously the most economical way of doing it. It's like if you want to watch Stranger Things on Netflix, but you don't like anything else on Netflix, just watch it for a month, binge it, and then cancel your subscription. It's sort of the same principle applies here, I guess. But what I like about it is they've gone for all this other added content to kind of tide you over while there's a slow release of animation. So they've turned it from Warhammer Plus being an animation subscription service to it's literally so much more. And, the weekly updates from like the painting for Lore Master, for battle reports, I think is probably what will be the mainstay of regular content that people are going to like enjoy and watch. And then the animations will be great when they arrive. But it seems like that would be a bit thin on the ground to start off with. The back catalogue of stuff is an amazing idea in principle. And it's like, how often will I care or want to bother to look back through those old books? Probably not that often, but it's great that it exists and that I know I have access to it. I think that's its selling point, knowing you have it more than actually using it, I think.
Okay, Phil, here's a random, out of the blue, fun way to close this segment. I put it to you that you now are in the position where you have the opportunity to pitch a show for Warhammer Plus. Now, you can think about this because I've had a moment to think about mine, so I'm going to go first because I don't want to just put you on the spot with this because I want you to give it some time. But I'm going to pitch a show idea. Okay. And if it becomes real, I'm going to, I'm going to demand that I, receive my appropriate royalty.
Is it
absolutely?
Is it the 40k interview concept that we just came up with?
No. We've thrown that out there. That one they've had already for free. They're going to get another one.
So can I ask? Is this an animation that you like, story-wise, or more like a
whatever you want?
Okay.
Whatever you want to pitch, you pitch it. Right? You're a TV executive now. You can come up with whatever mad idea. Think about like all those Alan Partridge TV show ideas that he came up with that never happened. I don't know. I can't remember any of the examples from his hilarious, idea reel that he came up with in a random episode of I'm Alan Partridge. But anyway, so my pitch, right? So this is what I think they should do. I think they should do a show called Grand Tournament House, or 40k House, or GT House, or Competitive House. Something.
That's a very long title.
Well, exactly. Well, obviously that you can pick one of those and then have house.
Not
and then
all of them in one sentence.
No. That's again, we'll work out the final name in post production. We'll go away and we'll let the boffins, come up with the idea. But in terms of the name, anyway, the idea is solid. So what we're doing is we're ripping off, a great many of the reality TV concepts that are out there in the world, where you get a bunch of people who are competing for a prize, but you put them in a house together. And this is a Warhammer 40,000 themed version of it. So basically you have your team captains. So if it were me and you, Phil, Team Dan and Team Phil, and then we essentially get to pick from a roster of players, and we accumulate our house of competitive players. And then every week or every day we have to complete challenges, and it culminates in us picking off people that have to play against each other, and there's all the tension and internal wranglings and the negotiation and the discussion of who's going to be best to go up against who and what's our strategy and what kind of armies we're going to do. And there's going to be like, painting contests at random points where they have to paint stuff quickly and then play it in the same day, or other kind of 40k or Games Workshop themed things. But the general pitch is you've got all the day-to-day drama of competitive gamers all huddled together in shared living accommodation, with the competitive element of wanting to be the best and, fighting to become the victor of Grand Tournament House. And then you've got all of the, the weird kind of like anxiety and aggression of people being in there and facing off against each other and having all those kind of competitive elements. So basically it's like
out like Big Brother style, the losers that you don't want.
Yes, that's it. So, and then based on certain things, like the team captains can elect, like people can vote for who they want to get rid of. So they'd be like, oh, that Joe, what a dead weight. He lost an easy win against, Jake or whatever it might be. So yeah, based on that, we're getting rid of him, and then all culminates in some big final showdown where they have to like play against everybody, or I don't know. Again, there's some finessing here, but I think that concept is money. It's basically just ripping off Ultimate Fighter, or any of these other shows that have done this, but just doing it with 40k. It works so well for TOUGH, which is TOUGH is an acronym for what the show is called, which is the Ultimate Fighter. Yeah, the Ultimate Fighter. Yeah, so I think that's the name of the show. But they just got a bunch of UFC fighters, put them into little teams, and it all breaks down with little funny little catty moments. And I think that'd be great because you just sprinkle that with 40k kind of like weirdness to it. So you can imagine like weird debates happening where people are getting all catty about what the most optimal way to run an AdMech army is or something. And that's my idea. That's my pitch. Competitive house. What you got, Phil? What's
so my one is Antiques Roadshow for old Warhammer minis.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yes.
Funnily enough, Antiques Roadshow is something I was forced to watch as a kid while my parents would make a roast dinner on a Sunday, and I'd just be bored out of my brains. I absolutely hated it.
It was the worst.
But it was the only thing that was allowed on at TV at that time of a Sunday, basically around 5 or 6 o'clock or whatever, just pre-dinner. While you're the most hungriest you've ever been. But I think this one has legs. So there's a few different versions of it. One of them is bringing your slightly old but painted models and getting effectively an evaluation on how crap someone's painted their models. But the one I'd be more interested in is a bit more of like a sort of unboxing style. It's like bringing in your clan packs, old Hammer metal minis, and getting an evaluation on it, and then maybe forcing them to actually rip them open, get the minis out. Because my original idea I was going for was grumpy old men unbox really old minis.
I love it.
But I think Antiques Roadshow sort of a bit more universal. For people that don't know what Antiques Roadshow is, it's you evaluate old antiques and someone tells you how much money they are.
Yes. Although they changed it recently, didn't they? Where they stopped telling people what it was worth and told them what they should insure it for.
Oh, really? I didn't realise that.
I think so, yeah.
Because I guess it was
a very weird one.
People go and they're like, I don't want to sell it, but please tell me how much this is worth.
Yes.
So I think maybe that's why they've changed the format slightly.
I mean, it was a great concept, though, right? Because as a show, it basically is playing on people's greed, right? Because most people... Certainly, people of a more mature vintage that are watching Antiques Roadshow, adamantly on a Sunday afternoon, they will have almost certainly accumulated some old tat from having existed for the last, half a decade or whatever it is. And,
I mean, surely more than half a decade.
I don't know. Sorry, half a century. Sorry, I got that bit wrong. I apologize. 5-year-olds going, hey, look at this rattle. Oh my God, it's worth a fortune. Anyway, yes. So, yes, these individuals obviously, plays to their greed because they all want to believe that sitting in their loft is a an artifact of great significant value, because who doesn't, right? I mean, everyone wants a solution to their problems.
Exactly.
I want some man to tell me that I now have enough money to last forever.
Exactly.
That would be lovely. But yeah, so that's the whole premise of the show, is they bring in old stuff and they get told how valuable it is, and then they equate some level of sentimentality to it. So this was my great uncle's hat, and as a result, it was the only thing that was left to me after he abandoned me, or whatever the narrative is. Usually it's a lot more heartwarming than that. The abandoning people thing is more attributed to Simon Cowell's X Factor style shows. This was more of a kind of wholesome adaptation of that. But mate, I love it. I'm just trying to think how it might work, though, because I mean, you're basically talking about a range of minis now that goes back 35 years.
Yeah, probably. I mean, this is the thing. It's how much is, if you're really after that kind of evaluation style, really the only ones that have any merit are like proper old hammer minis, which I think is defined by a certain age. Basically, I think it's like 1980s beyond, going backwards.
Yes.
But the ones that really have value are like basically brand new in boxes, like stuff that's, because they're the only ones that you can really legitimately be sure aren't like fakes or recast or something. So it has to be like an original one in its packaging, and that's the valuation. Maybe it needs to be a bit more like, I don't know, those pawn shop owner ones or those other slightly more shady shows where it's like, okay, great, but I've got a wad of money, I'm putting it down on the table, how much are you gonna take for this mini right now? And they're just progressively going up until they break, and then it's like, cool, we've got this mini, now we're going to open it up for everyone to see, an instant unboxing.
I tell you, I've just had another idea though, mate, for another show idea.
Ooh.
And again, they just keep rolling off. Basically, you just take popular formats and apply Warhammer logic to
I thought that's what we were doing.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we're doing. But yeah, so by extension, you could do like a Great British Bake Off style show where they're making stuff, but obviously you could do it for like sculptors. So you could have like up and coming sculptors sculpting like stuff. So doing loads of like sculpting challenges.
Actually,
I would eat that alive. Like, that is ridiculous. Like a show of like, because they did one, because I watched so many of those shows like unintentionally. Like they did a Great British Bake Off style show on Netflix that was Barbecue Pitmaster. I loved it.
Nice.
Just watching people making barbecue meats and competing to be the best.
Yeah, because I've seen one about, well, I haven't seen it, but I've seen that it advertised. There's one on like cake making. There's
there's a pottery one.
Yeah, there's a glass blowing one as well.
Oh, the glass blowing one was good.
Sewing Bee, which I actually do watch sometimes with my partner.
Yeah. But the clay one, the pottery one is amazing, because one of the judges always breaks down in tears. He's so excited at how like creative the contestants are. He can't contain his like joy. Wow. But could you imagine the kind of eccentric personalities that reside within Games Workshop studios? Like, could you imagine like Jez being on a show judging people's models, and imagine him becoming like a Simon Cowell type character where he's like, nah. You're like,
get out of here. No.
Smoking.
You base this on my drawing. Get out.
That's my intellectual property. Get out.
Sorry, Jez, we can't do accents. If you've listened to this show in the past, you'd have realised that. Yeah.
We try though. We try. But that would, oh man, that would be money.
Because you could have a good spin-off show, which is like dioramas, table design, scenery. Can just go on.
The possibilities are endless. We should go work for them as heads of programming.
We've got so many great ideas.
Exactly. We're just literally we'll just watch BBC One and we'll go, right, we can do that. We can make a 40k show out of that. No trouble. Boosh.
Certainly.
Mate, it's honestly, if they go down that line, they're just going to be printing money. I'm just going to be all in. I'm all in on that. There we go. So there you go. Games Workshop, if it's not already in production, make it happen. And obviously, you can always reach out to us.
For more classic gems.
Exactly, we're a very affordable duo. We're open to offers. Anyway, there you go. God, blimey, that was actually quite a fun way to conclude all that, I reckon. So, what do you reckon in isolation, Phil? You're in, right? Like, I mean, it's cool, right? We're good.
Yeah, I'm going to subscribe. I'm going to get my free mini. Free, not three. Yeah, free.
You're not going to get free of free minis, no.
No. Yeah, I think the ongoing free minis could be a cool thing. Every year, something else comes. Personally, I'd have loved it if it was every 6 months, because 12 months is such a long time. Like I would probably pay double to have a mini every 6 months, even though I said I'm not that fussed about the mini. I just want that more instant gratification that I expect from the internet as a millennial. That's my entitlement.
Are you a millennial? Or are you not like
no,
a
19.
Gen
well,
X?
no, 1980s
or Gen Z. Sorry,
1980s is millennial apparently, but there is a term for it that they're not actually quite. We talked about this last episode, I thought, or maybe
we might be going back around.
But basically,
just because I can't believe you're a millennial.
Well, exactly. Early millennials from like 1980 to like 93 or 95. Sorry, 83 or 85 aren't. There's another term for them to describe that they're not really millennials, but technically
weird.
They are.
They exist in the nothing.
It was basically they were born before like sort of internet devices and computers were much more prevalent, which is what really defines a millennial, apparently.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
They're they're the creatures that made up Eternia in the Never-Ending Story before the nothing came in and destroyed them all.
No.
And the proper millennials, they're the nothing because they let the computers and things stop them from reading. You see?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Exactly. I can't remember what the wolf was called. I remember there was a rock biter and a big snail that went fast, and Atreyu and the horse that they drowned in mud. Oh, what a movie!
Oh yeah. No, I remember now.
There you go. Come back to the big turtle thing that would like sneeze. Remember that?
No.
You don't remember that? You've got to fight. We don't do impressions.
Don't do impressions. That's not what the show's about.
That's not what this is about. Don't come here for the impressions.
So you
maybe do.
So you're subscribing. You think it's a good deal?
Thank you, Phil. Jesus. Yes. No, I am. I think. Because I don't know, I'm already buying the Warhammer 40k app, and I'm actually quite interested in Age of Sigmar for what it is. I mean, I dabbled with the idea of playing it in their second edition, but didn't, even though I spent a lot of money on buying the models. I haven't done anything with them, so I'm really hopeful that the Gloomspite Gits get better, because I've got a really abundant collection of Gloomspite Git stuff, so I'd quite like that to become good.
Nice.
But yeah. There we go. But yeah, no, I'm much more in favor of it than I thought I might have been. And yeah, genuinely, I think it's a cool offering. So good on them. I think they've done well there. They'll get an extra 50 quid of my money every year. Not that they needed to try too hard for that. I almost. Anyway, I'm a victim. I'm trapped in the loop. Exactly. There's no saving me now.
But no, yeah, good on them. I think it was pleasantly surprised, and I think most people were taken aback by how good the deal seems to be.
Agreed.
So, yeah.
No, they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, really good.
It's one of the few times in recent memory where Games Workshop have just absolutely nailed it. There's honestly little to no negatives that I can throw out.
Just don't let us.
I mean, maybe the content might not. Yeah, exactly. You're riding high now, so keep it going. It's going to be good. All right, cool. Transitional noise. Woo! All right, Phil. It's the end of the show. Do you want to know something funny, Phil? What I've been trialing this week is I've been listening to music while recording, because of the way our recording software works and wearing headphones. I can listen to slightly, diminished musical sounds while also conducting a podcast. I feel like, bizarrely, I don't want to necessarily suggest that it's had an obviously positive impact on my output, but I feel like it has. I don't know. I feel like the up-tempo sounds that I've been enjoying throughout have increased my general... I don't know. I think it's just increased my general enthusiasm for talking. It gives me something to sort of bob along with.
You're basically drowning out the sound of my voice, is what you're saying.
No, because I can hear you very audibly. I mean, at this moment in time, the audio of the music is quite quiet. It's like at 5%.
So we get an insight into what the music is. Bit of Tay-Tay, Katy Perry, maybe.
Oh yeah. So right now I'm listening to "Nosebleed" by Tiger Wine.
I've got no context or reference or recollection of what or who that is.
Well, fair enough.
I'll check it out later, though.
Oh, will you? Go.
I
Enjoy
guess.
some of the Tiger Wine. I was just listening to some Wargasm before that.
Lovely.
I was listening to some Split by Wargasm. That was a good song.
Okay.
So there you go. That was a good track, but very up tempo, very sort of screamy stuff, as it were. So yeah, some good tunes. I was actually, and then before that as well, Phil. Maybe there's one you did know. I was listening to Mayonnaise by the Smashing Pumpkins.
Ooh, I obviously love Smashing Pumpkins. I can't recall Mayonnaise though. Is it an old one or a new one?
No. It's from the album Siamese Dreams.
Oh right. Oh, well, I've probably heard it a million times then. Yeah.
Yeah, almost certainly. It's the one that goes. I'm trying to recall. I'm now playing it in my head. So it's the one with it's the quiet one that's like. You know that one?
Copyright strike. I said copyright strike from YouTube. No, I'll just listen to it afterwards if that's.
And it sort of breaks down, and then the track is something along. There's a lot of like weird, like moany, like moments where he goes like throughout this sort of thing.
That's
I don't know if
it's Smashing Pumpkins for you.
That is pretty much it. It's not Rat in a Cage or whatever it was. What was the actual song actually called?
I don't know.
Despite all my red, that one.
I'm
just a rat in a cage.
I can't remember. No, you're asking me something from my youth.
From your youth. Fair enough. Anyway, that's just a nice little thing. The other thing that I've been on a bit of a sort of binge over the last week, mate. I've been mad into Rick Priestley videos. I've gone utterly bonkers on Rick Priestley recently because I'm just obsessed with the idea of like trying to understand the methodology behind like the old rule sets and Horus Heresy and stuff, and what it is that definitively. Because as a gamer of a certain vintage, I obviously grew up playing Rick Priestley's 40k. Right, like that's the 40k of my childhood, and therefore I have a certain level of nostalgia for it, both from a second edition perspective and then obviously a third edition perspective, where he worked with like the team there and Alessio Cavatore and built this incredible game system that went on for 4 more editions until 8th, because third, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, so yeah, actually more like 5 editions, I suppose, actually. But so I've just been obsessed with like listening to his insights on stuff. He's got some really amazing perspectives on game design and talking about, balancing game mechanics and all the rest of it. And you know what I did, Phil? I actually bought his rulebook for his 5 years old gaming system called Beyond the Gates of Antilles, just to see if there's some way that you can kind of 40k-ify it and see if it can work, because it seems like a really exciting system. I'm just keen to try different gameplay methodologies at the moment.
You'll have to send me a link, because obviously we've discussed off the show about Rick Priestley. You sent me a couple of links, and that sent me down the Rick Priestley rabbit hole, the Rick Priestley hole, as it would be called. So I've watched a bunch of his videos as well. You sent me one about anti-chambers. That one was really interesting as well. Which was interesting because that was, I think, at RopeCon, which I believe is in Sweden or Denmark or somewhere. And I had already seen a RopeCon video like earlier this year, where I think Tumas, who's the guy who created Mordheim, did a 20-year retrospective of Mordheim. I think that was 2020. It was, it would have been 2020. So I'd watched that one like earlier this year or last year even, maybe.
Actually, 2019 would be 20 years of Mordheim, because Mordheim came out in 1999. I'm sure of that.
Yes. Well, because it was done, the concept was for the like Millennium Bug in fantasy, like that kind of hysteria. So yeah, I presume it came out in 99. So yeah, I don't know when he did the talk.
Well, maybe it was.
It might have come out in. It might have come out in 2020, or sorry, in 2000. But they obviously.
I definitely remember seeing it at Games Day. Cool. I went to the Games Day when they unveiled it. I just can't remember which Games Day that was now. I can remember walking into the Birmingham, not National Exhibition Centre, but like
Yeah.
There was in the indoor arena one or something is what it was, and it was amazing because like you walked in and they had all the big screens playing like sequences from like the video games were like CG cutscenes, but then also loads of film footage from the Inquisitor movie. Really dodgy. Not the one that the guy did as a kind of not Kickstarter because Games Workshop weren't cool on that back in the day, but yeah, like it was amazing. But yeah, Mordheim was everywhere at that event. It was incredible.
Yeah, so it's fun. Yeah, so I'd watched that video already. So I was like, oh, it's Robcon. That was kind of cool. And then I discovered Rick Priestley had written a book all about like how to write rules for wargaming. I can't quite remember what it's called now, but I actually bought that myself. So we both bought Rick Priestley books this week because I was like, oh, that's really interesting to see his take on like it was all about good sort of not quite ethics, but like how to go about writing good rules. There's a great interview with him about it on War Games Illustrated. They've done a ton of interviews with him, but also with other people. Like there's a great one about with the Perry twins, who are miniature sculptors. Amazing. So I've been watching a bunch of their videos as well. There's some great like little sculpting tips and tricks here and there, for example. So they use like E45 hand cream as their kind of instead of saliva or water for their tools and their minis to get the green stuff smooth and not sticking. That's apparently what they now use. So that was like, oh, that's cool. Going to buy some of that later on when I do my next sculpting project, see if it works any better. But the one about the War Games one was really interesting because they were like, you got to have like, sort of like respect for the reader, and it was all about like not you don't treat them like stupid person, but don't waste their time either. Like try and be as concise with the rules writing as possible. It was funny because I then watched because he then went on and I think he did the Bolt Action game, but also did Black Powder as well. Which is like more like Napoleonics and stuff. And I watched like a bit of a review of that, and it was interesting seeing like how big Black Powder is. So that is like a 200-page rule book, which is a lot of rules. And one of the reviews absolutely slated it for the waffling of the rules, and it was just saying how badly written it was. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because obviously he's meant to be like all about much more concise, tightly written rules that sort of almost but like done in sort of plain speak. And it'd be interesting to see some of his earlier stuff and current stuff versus where 40k has gone, and maybe despite some moaning about 40k, their kind of bullet pointed system is actually a better way of doing things. Like how many pages is 9th edition rules? It's got to be what, like 20 pages, 30 pages, 40 pages maybe,
probably closer to like 50. It's a lot,
but it's not 200. It is my point.
No, it's true. I think the thing is about the older editions of 40k is that I think a lot of the time you forget that so much of their conversations or so much the thing was with that system is they kept trying to address lots of like edge cases and gave lots of like diagrams and illustrations for everything, and there was lots of over explanation, lots of tables as well.
Well, I also think that one of the main things is now a lot of those rules are kind of parked away in the data sheet. So if you were to take all of them out and have, basic stat line, like a simple stat line for your units, and that was it, and then think about, basically all the special rules type thing would have to come back into the core rule book. Like how big would that rule set actually be? So it's sort of, while it is a smaller rule set, it's sort of deceptive because actually it's not got all the rules in it per se, because there's a lot more hidden elsewhere, like in the codexes, in the data sheets and stuff like that.
And I think that's the thing. And there are a lot more streamlined instances within modern 40k, so 8th and 9th edition, where they basically went, well, we'll do away with blast markers because that's crazy, so that saves you 2 pages of rules, because explaining how this token moves around in 3-dimensional space is crazy. And again, to the extent of trying to explain what you do when one of these templates interacts with models inside of a ruin. So you position it at the top, but there could be 3 layers of miniatures going down a ruin,
and you hit all of them, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it was like it was even more abstract
if it
than
had
that.
a roof, you actually just hit the top one, and anything in the shadow of the footprint you don't actually hit because it's protected by the wall, because it's dropping down. Yeah.
And again, it's like, removing that kind of mechanic takes away from the bloat of the rule. But what it also does is remove some of the interesting kind of more thematic, more tactile moments. And I think that was one of the really interesting things. I watched one of the interviews with Rick, and he was talking about the idea of, that, one of the things he says is that he isn't interested in knowing what Games Workshop does anymore. He doesn't pay attention. He's gone, I'm out. What they're doing now is fine. But what he did say was he was talking to the guy that made Age of Sigmar. And what I found that was quite interesting, he threw out the anecdote that when he was making 40K and the original Warhammer, he was making a fantasy tabletop war game. So he was basing everything off of his wargaming knowledge and experiences, and he was building a rule set that exemplified tabletop wargaming. And that's very much what the game had been for such a long time. But he said with Age of Sigmar, the goal was much more almost like trying to implement more modern game design ideas based more off of almost like trading card mechanics. So similar to like Magic the Gathering. And interestingly, when he was talking about that, I found it really compelling because actually it sort of distills the idea of what's different about 40K now. It's more like 3-dimensional, like objects that depict these kind of like data sheets, which themselves kind of take on the identity of like cards, which have stats and things incorporated into them. And, it becomes much more about the units and the weirds. Again, I've said it this way many times, but I think through listening to the interviews with Rick and other kind of veteran game designers, 40K of old was a sci-fi or fantasy war game with lots of like, futuristic elements, whereas 40K modern is a game. It's not as much themed around wargaming, which is fine because I still like it for what it is. It's just it's different.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I listened to that one and about that section, I saw that more specifically referring to the stratagems. Like your stratagems are like your deck of cards that you get to play to do special things at certain times of the game. And it's different from what is, I guess, traditionally a war game, which is much more stat and dice based. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means it's different and appeals to sometimes different people and stuff like that. Yeah, well, some of the other stuff I was looking at was like some of the going down the Perry, not the Perry twins and the Perry miniatures, but also that reminded me of they worked on, because obviously there was Lord of the Rings, but there was also Warhammer Historical, which was, and I remember having the Ancient Battles one, which I think was the original, but they did all sorts. So they took the old Warhammer Fantasy rule set and converted it to historical wargaming. So they did like Napoleonics, they did the Wild West, they did ancient Rome, ancient Greece, all of that stuff. And that was really interesting to see, that they had done that, because I think the Perry twins especially were still are really into historical wargaming more than the fantasy and sci-fi stuff. What was really interesting, I watched one of those interviews with, I think it's Alan Perry. It's the one that lost his arm in a crazy historical reenactment accident.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. So content warning if you want me to go into the details.
No, don't go into the details.
Yes,
I had no idea. I just assumed he just was born without it, because obviously twins sometimes that kind of
no. So he was always a right-handed sculptor, and then had basically he was loading a cannon and it went wrong. And
flipping heck,
and then lost it. And he I think within a few weeks got back into sculpting with his left hand.
Wow.
And then his last miniature he ever did was Smaug for Lord of the Rings, and that was
He did
also
Smaug,
his
did he?
first digital sculpt that he ever did as well. And I think in those days they used like a haptic feedback kind of sculpting tool, like pen with an arm. And he sort of started off with the head, I think, and he was talking about how they didn't have enough reference material for it from the guys, what's the company?
New Line Cinema.
Yeah. So they didn't have enough details, but I think they had some initial head stuff. So he's like, oh, I just start off doing the head, because I think he actually sculpted it originally, and then he was like, oh, I'll give it a go with the digital. So he did the head, and he was like, oh, that's cool. And then he's like, oh, I'll do the neck. And then when more details came through, he ended up just doing it all. But I get the impression that neither of them were like a huge fan of the digital stuff in comparison to green stuff.
Well, again, I think it's, again, certain vintage, certain people, you know what you like, and the kind of, the immediate kind of, because again, I think the thing is, it's like, for example, myself as someone who enjoys illustrating and drawing pictures, I've never embraced any of the digital technologies for illustration, because I just like the tactile immediacy of working with a pen on paper. So like, I'm ridiculous. I don't even use a pencil. I use like a biro, and everything I draw is just biro on paper. And if it goes wrong, I just go and move on. Because every time I watch like illustrators or artists create work on digital, it seems like they spend as much time going back and changing stuff as they do kind of like, creating stuff and moving forwards. It's like, they draw like 100 lines before they resign on one thing. And I'm much more of the mindset that, you should sort of celebrate those mistakes. Obviously, if they become too ridiculous, they're too ridiculous. But a lot of the time I like working around the mistakes, because I think it creates a more kind of creative process. It doesn't mean you always draw the best stuff. I could definitely get better results by illustrating on a tablet or on a Wacom or whatever it is. But, my preference is so all those illustrations I've ever done on my Instagram have all literally just been half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour of just complete, like, I had a blank page and no idea what was going down on it. And I usually start by like scribbling out a circle, and then the rest kind of just like happens. And that's something I enjoy. I enjoy kind of building out from that. And I can imagine as like a sculptor, it's the same kind of methodology, right? Like you know what you like, and there's no reason why, if you've had commercial success doing it the way you like for as long as you have, that you shouldn't continue doing that. I imagine you're relatively different from your kind of graphic design background in terms of what you do. And, I suppose you've had to embrace the technologies, but I'm sure for your own kind of like output.
Yeah, I mean, It depends. Like in terms of, I do a lot. Well, I used to do a lot of illustration, but that was still mostly traditional, like pencil, pen. But I'd quite often scan it in and digitally color it, for example. Obviously, I'll do web design and stuff. That's all digital. But then when it comes to sculpting, I really like, doing stuff with green stuff. I wouldn't. I keep pondering about whether to get into 3D sculpting and stuff, but I don't know. It just didn't seem for me. It feels like it's teaching me more stuff, and it's a massive route to go down, because you'd have to learn sculpting, learn a 3D program, for example, and it would be. You could get a haptic pen, for example, which is crazy expensive, but that would replicate that kind of traditional techniques. But if you're just doing it on keyboard and mouse, you don't quite get that. And I sort of feel like that's what some of the 3D stuff lacks, is that kind of tactile realness. It's almost too artificially good, if that makes sense. But then you'd also have to go down the 3D printing route as well to actually get your physical models made, and that just seems like another lot of effort that I don't really want to go down either.
Well, you see it exemplified in like the latest lines of Forge World miniatures, now that they've embraced that sort of digital methodology, and how they just lack something compared to the old hand sculpted things. There's a soul and an essence to those kind of figures that it's the imperfections that make them great. And I think that's the problem often with, not the problem, because I love the digital sculpts. I mean, the Citadel stuff is phenomenal, but it does often have this kind of otherworldly kind of, almost like it is just perfect, and perfect's great a lot of the time. But sometimes I like just I find there's a bit more personality in some of the old stuff. But then equally, in the overall quality benchmark has increased, because I can't pretend that all the old sculpts from 20 years ago that were all done by hand were all top shelf. Like there were always good ones, and then there were always less good ones, shall we say. But there you go. Anyway, there's a nice little bit of insight in terms of what me and Phil mostly been filling our days up with in terms of conversations and other things outside of the more 40k related hobby news and so on. But I guess we may as well see what our community folk are talking about at the moment. Have we had any exciting questions or feedback based on what we put out there in the ether?
Yeah, so I put it out today asking about Warhammer Plus and what hobby stuff everyone else is working on. So we've got one back from Mini Kologi. I presume that's how it's pronounced. He's called Joe. Let's call him Joe.
Okay. Hello, Joe.
He says, love your podcast. Here's my comment. How long until they depreciate this service or the physical items it's supposed to replace? And then he's like, why is everything a damn subscription now? And in brackets, he puts grumpy old man harumph noises.
I don't know what he means by depreciate in this instance. I apologize. It probably is obvious, but I'm struggling to grasp.
I sort of wonder if it's around either like the quality or quantity of stuff, maybe, or would it be something that they just, do for a few years and then go, we're going to stop it now? A bit like, because a lot of their apps get supported for so long, but then sort of fall by the wayside. I sort of feel like this is going to stick around, and if it's successful, will be around forever.
If it sticks around, it sticks around. If it doesn't, it doesn't, I guess. I mean, I think my perspective on this stuff is you just kind of have to live in the moment with these things and just sort of enjoy it for what it is today. And if it has any value to you now, then fantastic. And if that changes in the future, then you just got to, you got to reevaluate based on your own personal circumstances. Sometimes you grow together and other times you grow apart. And that's how it is with online subscription services. But I do agree, there's a lot of them in there. Oh, crikey. I've got so many on the go at the moment, actually. I sometimes forget to, I often forget to unsubscribe from a lot of them that I'm not using on the regular. But it is what it is. I just kind of accept it as one of the perils of modern living.
Indeed. So the next one is from Pastor Levac. He says, if all the back issues of White Dwarf are there, I'd be keen to subscribe for that alone. Plus the mini is amazing, in brackets, Vindicare Assassin. Not sure yet what the Australian prices are. GW prices are never good when it comes to us poor Australians or New Zealanders.
I mean,'ve heard that. It's quite a pricey hobby out there in the land down under. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, fantastic that you're so positive about the Vindicare, and apologies if my perspective on it was offensive to you in any way. I doubt you really cared that much. But yeah, I mean, again, if people like it, fantastic. And obviously, if you're keen to get your hands on it, this is a great way of doing it. I mean, potentially based on the inflation of prices within the GW kind of pricing model, you might be getting a better deal in Australia than potentially New Zealand than anywhere else. If these things are retailing for, like, I don't know, if a £25 figure retails for 100 Aussie dollars, then you're probably doing great. If this thing's costing you, like, I don't know, 70 Aussie dollars a year or whatever it is, but depends how it shakes out, I guess. But yeah, no, I've no idea obviously how that's going to go. But yeah, I mean, looks cool. I don't know, Phil, any thoughts on that side of it?
Well, yeah, I think for him it will be price dependent, and yeah, potentially back issues of White Dwarf. I think that's going to be good. I just really want them to go back into the back catalogue. What would be really cool if they did is give us things like, Citadel Journal, like all those other kind of weird spin-off magazines that they used to do. Inferno, stuff like that. If they start doing those sorts of things, I've been looking at some of the, I've been obviously looking at things like Inquisitor and Mordheim, and if they put on, like, what was it, Town Crier, which were their spin-off magazines, and there was one for Inquisitor, which even though I've got one copy.
It'd be cool if they did for a few years they had Visions, right? That was amazing.
Oh, well, do you know what? That Warhammer Visions, I actually really liked the concept of. Everyone else seemed to hate it because that was the days
really?
of Warhammer Weekly, sorry, White Dwarf
Yes.
Weekly, which no one
Yeah,
liked except me, it seemed, because actually I quite enjoyed my taking my little copy on the tube when I was commuting to work and having a read through it like the nerd I was. But Warhammer Visions was their monthly version, which was just packed full of beautiful artwork. Well, not artwork,
Yeah,
it was photography of miniatures. I thought that was really cool, and there's always little sidebars of snippets of how people converted stuff up and stuff. So yeah, Warhammer Visions, the RIP. If they brought that back, that'd be great.
Nah, agreed.
Yeah. So next one, RH Freelance. He says, I'm expecting lackluster support for the apps, slow releases, mistakes, and more. But like all the other plastic crackheads here, I'll part with my money. Give us something to do whilst I wait for my Grey Knight Codex.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we said it perfectly towards the end of the segment, which is that there's a lot of positivity, a lot of excitement around it. I think they've done a great job with the announce and a great job with communicating the service. Now it's for them to deliver, and let's hope they don't score an own goal on that one.
Yeah, I think for Age of Sigmar players, the release of the AOS app will be a big deal, sort of make or break sort of thing. And I think they announced it was free for the first few months. Maybe I could be wrong. I got the impression they were doing a similar kind of beta testing, and it was either cheap or free, a bit like when the 40k one came out. Anyway, moving on. Mordian John, he says, I think it's good value. I'll probably subscribe. I'll be interested to see how their content will compare to the current indie offerings. That's interesting. I presume he's talking in that respect about things like battle reports.
Talking about us.
Oh. No.
As in people like us,
Yes, I assume more in terms of actual competition and things like Lore Masters, the painting videos, and the
they're not going to be.
And the battle reports.
Oh, sorry, Phil. It did that weird thing where I couldn't hear you talking, but hopefully it came through in the recording. But yes, agreed. I think there'll be other stuff that doesn't necessarily compete with the sort of stuff that we do, but that competes with a lot of stuff that people out there in the YouTubes and other kind of content creation realms does do. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
I mean, you could argue that they don't really have any indie competition when it comes to animations anymore because they've scuppered them off to the Warhammer app.
Exactly. Hoovered them all up.
Exactly.
Purchased them all. And fair play to them in that regard. What was I going to say? But yeah, as I was saying before, though, maybe they need to go out of their way and spend big money on popular podcasts. Maybe that's it. They need to throw a Spotify deal someone's way.
Exactly. So from Morgian John, we've now got Archon John. We've got all the Johns. He's like, I'm totally in. Looks great value. I'm less bothered by the YouTube style content, which is bat reps, painting tutorials, and lore, but I'll gladly devour the animations. Not averse to YouTube style content. I just have a limited hours in a week to consume said content, and look out, sir, takes up 50% of that as it is. You saying we go on too long, Archon John?
I think that is exactly what Archon John is saying, but obviously not long enough because he's still,
got another 50% we could eke out of him.
Exactly. We need to do more to compete for his mind share.
Bring back those 6-hour episodes again.
Oh, mate. I mean, to be fair, I was gobsmacked after we did, 4 hours or whatever it was on Adeptus Sororitas. But there you go. We'll get back to it. 6-hour episodes.
Certainly. Next one, 2-Bit Paints. He says, seems like a decent value after the poor launch of the app. I'd be interested if this is handled better. That's the 40k app he's talking about. Also be interested to see what's actually available at launch. I've not done much lately, but I have read the 2 new Sabbath Crusade books, which I highly recommend.
Oh, nice. Yeah. What's the Sabbath Crusade stuff again?
That's called Ghosts.
Yes,
style of books. I think there's a couple of recent ones. I think one of them might have been actual Gaunt's Ghosts, which was like a sort of a precursor to a lot of the other stories.
Gotcha.
And then one of them was an adjacent side story about some other stuff that I'm not entirely sure about.
Good times, Phil.
Yeah.
Were all of those Instagram messages?
They were, yeah.
We should probably move over to Facebook because I feel like we don't do Facebook any justice when it comes to these things. And I can see now we have at least 4 comments on Facebook.
4.
I know, that's actually good innings for us on there. We even have one from a guy that is indicated as top fan. There you go.
Well, that's quite
Top
impressive.
fan Pete. Yeah, I know. I didn't know people had the ability to denote themselves as top
Well,
fans.
I think Facebook automatically detects them and flags them as such. I think sometimes you get an option to be like, you're a top fan. Do you want to have it as a badge when you're on that page? And you can say
that's
yes.
Fantastic. So Pete, top fan Pete, thank you so much for for outing yourself as a top fan. Surely we should start with top fan Pete.
I'll start with Pete. He says, I'm currently about to start working on a Necromunda-based Imperial Guard army, and honestly, I'm so excited to see how it will turn out. Will be my first time working with green stuff too, so I'm a tad nervous. As I said earlier, E45 apparently is the go-to hand moisturizer for your tools and for your green stuff. I use water, but E45, the stuff of professionals.
I mean, it's exciting though, right? I mean, and good on you, Pete, in the sense that using Necromunda minis will definitely help you when it comes to future-proofing yourself with scale creep. I think anyone who has seen the Gaunt's Ghost minis in reality will immediately notice they're quite a bit bigger than some of your existing guardsmen. So yeah, and obviously the Necromunda range is so fantastically varied in terms of communicating.
As a guess, what do you think he's going to go for? One particular gang, and if so, which? Or do you think he's going to do like a mix and match, like different types, maybe representing?
If I was doing it, I'd base it on Cawdor, and I'd have loads of Redemptionists and go Pyromaniacs.
No, brilliant. I'd almost be like, you could do Katachan as Goliath, like real big, muscular hunks of men.
Mate, yes. Katachan as Goliath is a big win. There's also, what was that one? What were the ones that got added with the expansion with like the the Zone Mortalis terrain, the weird Chaos Cult guys that were
so there's Palatine Enforcers, and there was the Cult of Flesh,
something like that. They were so cool. But not very Imperium, I suppose.
More Traitor Guard for those ones, I think.
Yeah. I'd love to see someone do them with all Escher, I suppose. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That would be very cool. But
I think literally you could pick any of them and they would work really well.
Yeah, I agree. No, great idea.
Cool. Let's pick another one. We're going to go for Ian. He says, I can't work out if it's good value or not. If it wasn't for the model, I'd say no, but that's valued at approximately half the cost, so fair play. The app also helps, so it's certainly making me consider it for a year up front. I do, however, expect their videos to be of a higher standard. That's interesting. I assume their weekly videos will be to pretty good standard, I'd hope.
Yeah, agreed.
If they're not, yeah, it depends on what you really want out of this. If that's what you're really paying for and you don't currently subscribe, this thing, if you don't currently subscribe to the 40k app, because let's be fair, it's still not that great. It's okay. I use it a lot for a rules reference more than like the army building aspect of it, because
I don't use the army builder.
It's not there really, even to this day. So if you're not already subscribed to the 40k app, then it is a big ask, because you're like, okay, it's like $5 a month for some weekly videos. If you're not fussed about the back catalogue, and even then the back catalogue isn't going to be that great initially, it's just going to get better over time. Yeah, because to me, like the animations is almost like the thing I could care about least. That's the icing on the cake, and like the model's cool, but really for me, it's like the weekly videos. I think like the painting stuff, the lore, battle reports, whatever. Like I'll watch them if they're good, but the back catalogue of stuff and White Dwarfs, I think, is probably one of the more interesting offers out of a lot. So yeah, depends.
That's why they need to get us involved as heads of programming, mate. We'll fill it with great content.
It's like, who doesn't want 40k like Antiques Roadshow?
Exactly, mate. It's got to happen. Maybe we should just take all these ideas and start making them on our YouTube channel.
Well, exactly. We could do that. Yeah.
We're just going to quit our jobs and start a production company doing 40K
should be easy. Anyone can do it.
Exactly. Oh, I'll let the wife know. She'll love that.
I know. You got a couple more.
One more
Ooh.
though. I reckon we can't keep going. The clock is running. I can see our recording software saying you got 10 minutes left.
All right.
So
well, we could squeeze 2 in 10 minutes easily.
Oh, we could do. Go on then. All right.
Right.
We've only got 2 more to do, so let's do them.
Yeah. So the first one's Jew.
Yeah.
Jew Bravo. He says, firstly, I was thinking that it would be garbage, like the overcosted, not functional app, and Games Workshop just want to make more money in battle reports and painting tutorials. There are plenty of battle reports and painting tutorials out there for free already. But meanwhile, I think about all the nice around pack. It could be a nice round pack. So getting the apps, the vault with all the great books from the past, some nice models is a thing I will give a try. I'm a hobbyist who is totally into 40k, and now we're finally getting some long-awaited series about 40k. So yeah, I think that's the animations will be cool. Like when they come, they'd be fun to watch.
I think Joe is or Jew or however
Joo. I presume that's Jew.
No, is that Jew? Anyway. The point is that, yeah, I think you summarize it beautifully. We all had our initial apprehension, but I think now we're all pretty optimistic. So, no, good summary. And hopefully they don't disappoint, as I keep saying.
And the last one, Sean, he says, it looks like great value. I'm optimistic over the whole thing, to be honest. It seems like a good price for the content when you consider the other services involved. The models are great, and that assassin is stunning. In your face, Dan. He didn't say that bit. He says, sign me up, though.
Well, he probably didn't say that because I can't imagine too many people would expect someone not to like that assassin, because I know it ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. I've heard nothing but positive sentiment about it. And I don't want to be like a hipster who's sitting, on his, pile of vinyl records wearing a tweed jacket while,
You're like, I've got the old metal one.
I do, yes. I've got the old metal one, the one where he was standing on the skull of an orc. That was
what's the valuation of that one? Can you tell me? Oh, I can on this new show.
Yeah, exactly. Enough money to last forever. That's always the answer that you want.
How much is that Warhammer? Is what it should be called.
How much is that Warhammer? How much? So HM, IW is or ITW. HMITW. Himetwa. That's something. There you go. What a great show.
Yeah.
No, I know. Probably not so great. But yeah, no, I mean, I think a perfectly valid summary. I think, again, yeah, I like the fact that people like the assassin. I think people are more impressed with the surrounding elements than the actual assassin itself. I keep saying.
Well, that's all you can see mostly the statue. So
exactly. It's a nice looking bit of terrain that happens to have an assassin stuck on it,
like a Kinder egg. You get the terrain and you crack it open, and inside is a little mini. It's a little assassin.
Oh, like a Kinder egg.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, beautiful. All right, brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for participating as always in our community question segment. We always really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to give us your thoughts and feelings, and hopefully you enjoyed our responses to your various thoughts and feelings. So yeah, that was that. Anything else, Phil, or should we just end the show?
Well, we should end on a little tease for what we're going to talk about next week.
I don't know what we're going to talk about next week, Phil. So you tell me. I mean, crikey, I'm in the dark as you are.
Well, so obviously, Cadron Warzone book's coming out, but that won't be for a couple more weeks. So you have to wait for that one. I think we can have a general chit chat about rules from days on old, or we said we were going to do hobby chat about.
Are we going to bring back the quiz next week, Phil?
Oh, yeah. If Richie's up for it, let's see if he's up.
Let's bring back the quiz.
Yeah.
We could maybe do an update on our thoughts and feelings about doing a live event.
True. We've had some feedback. We've had probably more votes for a live stream than we have for a live in-person event, but we have had a couple of people express an interest in that too. So that's no. Oh, one thing I did want to talk about this week, but we can talk about next week, is I did a little kind of like survey to do with missions on my Instagram stories, where I ask lots of people questions about like objectives, when they like to score it, like end of turn, end of battle round, that sort of thing. I think I did like 5 or 6 questions overall, and I had about 300 people like respond to my stories.
Blimey.
In a kind of, with the Instagram stories, you get yes, no sort of answer A, answer B.
Yeah. You get
So I did that. So
heat
we can
map
talk
thing.
about that, because that'd be a good thing, and maybe we talk about missions overall and stuff. Maybe.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah.
There we go. We got some hard data to discuss. All right, brilliant. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a bumper episode by all accounts, or we'll just narrow it down to one of those things, and we'll see how it goes from there. But whatever the case, guys, thank you so much for listening. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.